All right, oh, almost everything's good to go. Looks good to me. Greetings, one and all. Be sure to tell me if there's any sort of audio problems or visuals. Right now, everything seems to be good on our end. We were having some problems with internet earlier. Something was glitching out on the Alaska side. One of the problems of trying to broadcast from the last frontier. So thanks for coming over and listening and participating in the discussion. If you have anything to add, we welcome it. Right now, I'm joined by Rolling Chairs. Greetings, Rolling Chairs. How you doing?
Hello, hello. Good to be here.
So this episode has definitely had my has had my interest peaked because I'm trying to figure out what in tarnations Disney is doing. If you have seen the episode, you know that these two characters currently on screen steal the show, literally. Not stealing in terms of that fans suddenly were like enamored by them. They literally took the camera and ran with it. It was weird. It was very weird. And I have no idea what Disney is doing. This episode felt so far removed from what we would have expected from any Mandalorian episode. It doesn't even make sense by Disney standards because this feels like they're retconning or trying to fix problems that are 10 years old. That's how weird this feels. This show should have literally come out before or at the very start of The Force Awakens. That's where I think that this episode probably fit. So, Rolling Chairs, I don't know if you have anything to add to this intro on this, but I just got to say that of what I was expecting, this was complete 180 of anything I was expecting to see in the show.
hmm Well, I always knew they introduced the Doctor Purvish,
Pershing.
early in Pershing, early in the Mandalorian. I think in season one, uh, and you didn't really know what he was doing. You kind of could understand just from like seeing some glimpses of his laboratory that he was doing stuff in relation to clone, and there was tons of theories going around like this is going to lead to uh, them bringing back Palpatine and such things like that, and Snoke. Uh, so I think they're really trying to build up to the Force Awakens and try and justify some of their decisions and make it seem a little, make it all make a little more sense.
Mm.
It wasn't the most entertaining episode, to be honest, but I always knew that they were going to expand on this character at some point. But the way they did on this episode, they're making it seem like we're going to keep hopping back into this character's story throughout the season, whereas the last two seasons, he would just get like show up in an episode or two, and he wouldn't even be a part of the whole episode. Really, we'd only see him from the Mandalorian's perspective, like whenever he was crossing the Mandalorians. This was a complete 180 where literally took the whole show, like you said. Um, it had some pros and cons, but we'll go more in depth into it to get farther into the discussion.
Right. Before we begin, really dive into the story as a whole, this is currently being streamed on two different platforms, Twitch as well as YouTube. And so right now we're trying to increase the view hours over on YouTube. And so if you could please consider taking a moment to actually go over and maybe watch this over on there at the same time, if possible. No pressure beyond that. We welcome everyone here and hope that if you've seen this episode, that you'll give your thoughts on it throughout this discussion. There's one last thing I want to kind of mention about this episode before we dive in. When this episode was playing, this felt like they are in some sort of they're taking some opportunity to try and not just retcon the past. They're trying to, I think, maybe build up to something else. I think that they're going to jump into the future again around the sequel trilogy. This episode felt like that. For those who did not see this episode introduces two brand new characters. It's given very little introduction. It's given very little warning that this is going to happen. We know Dr. Pershing. We know the other character. Let me see if I can remember what the character's name is. Alea Kane. Alea Kane is the other character. Both of them we've seen in the past. Both of them were kind of there for a moment, then gone for several episodes, for several seasons. Now they're both back, and they're on the planet Coruscant. The first time, if I remember right, this is the first time since Disney has owned the franchise that they've gone to Coruscant. I cannot think of another time that they've done that. And people thought for certain that we would really do a journey to Coruscant in the third sequel trilogy episode, but we didn't really go there. This show is set almost entirely on that planet, so very interesting thing to see. Feels like they're trying to shoehorn the sequels into the lore. Absolutely. All right, so let's pull up the episode and just kind of go through it scene by scene. So we begin where we left off, which is they're in this cavern. They're in the mines of Mandalore, and they have just encountered the strange creature. Well, correction, Bo-Katan has encountered the strange creature that's below the waters. By the way, this episode has spoilers. This discussion has spoilers about this episode, so forewarning to those who are watching. But we've just come out. We've seen the creature. Din Djarin is initially passed out. He's just laying there. For all he knows, he just collapsed when he entered the room. But he wakes up, he's coughing. Kind of interesting because he has a helmet on. Why is he coughing? It's almost as if Disney didn't realize that he has a helmet on. He didn't get water into his lungs. But he's coughing, he's coming to, and his first thought is, I have been redeemed. I have washed in the waters. But yet he doesn't have any real deep questions as to what happened, which kind of stood out to me about why would they have that. And Bo-Katan is obsessed with this creature that she just saw, but she's not letting it on. Somehow this has changed her worldview. But she doesn't even really tell Din what she saw. She just says, "Did you see anything?" Kind of a strange way to deal with this moment. But then again, based upon what I've seen of people who have been traumatized, this is actually a very legitimate response. And so I don't personally have any issue with how they went about this scene. I more don't like that they're brushing off what happened in the scene, and because they're about ready to just leave the planet, and we don't have any follow-up. We don't have Bo-Katan have any sort of reflection on this creature, no sort of thoughts to kind of mull over in her own mind. We just drop the ball with it and move on. Kind of a what they do with the rest of the series as a whole, to be perfectly honest. Rolling Chairs, I don't know if there's anything in the lore based upon what is introduced in the Clone Wars, but this creature the mythosaur that Bo-Katan has just seen. Have we ever seen this thing before?
No, this is something that's been introduced through this show. Um, like the living waters and stuff like that are never even mentioned in the Clone Wars. So they're definitely adding a little lore to Mandalore, but it's not really contradicting anything we've seen in the Clone Wars from all the arcs there. It's just you have the question like, why was this stuff kind of never talked about before? That's really the only like we've been there for like over like probably near 30 to 40 episodes of the Clone Wars on Mandalore, and we never even hear about either of these things. You would think. I think we're gonna learn more about the Mythosaur, and because was that thing there the whole time? Because she said it was the water was more shallow, and then once it got bombed or whatever, it caused it to go deeper.
It
So
seems like it would
I
have
just have
come
a
out of the deeps if that's the case. At least that's what it feels like they're hinting at.
or maybe this is like some creature that can go on land, like live on land and underwater. Like it can do both, like breathe underwater and in air. And this was like the only place it could like find safety from the bombings. Like if it was on the surface, it would have been bombed by the Empire, and that was the only place of safety it could find. Even though it was still damaged a bit, but yeah, I have a ton of questions about it, and I thought we were gonna dive into it in this episode, but they completely shoehorned in a different story. But based on Bo-Katan's reaction throughout the episode, I think we're gonna get like a real heart to heart between her and Din at some point. Hopefully next episode, but you can tell she's trying to process a lot of stuff, and her and Din just need to have like a real good conversation, not something about a mission or anything, just like a real heart to heart about Mandalorians and what it means to be a Mandalorian, just every little thing, and what she obviously saw there. But there's so much more that could be done.
Well,
But to answer your question, no, this is never introduced in Clone Wars.
So that's interesting you mentioned about having a heart to heart. I notice a lot of shows in Hollywood, a lot of shows on TV do not like having heart to hearts. A perfect example is the show of oh golly, what? Stranger Things. That's it. Stranger Things is notorious for doing this, where they do not like having any heart-to-hearts. They always brush off things by saying, no, it's stupid, and then they move on and they just forget about it. Or they will say any other number of things that will cause them to just skip to the next scene because they don't want to resolve it. Because if they resolve it, that takes away the drama that they're trying to build up. But then the drama feels fake, which is problematic. They could have taken the drama and made it far deeper, but they just want to brush it off and kind of move on. Bo-Katan, at least in this occasion, I actually liked, because the Mythosaur is such a very striking creature to come across that to actually encounter it would be world-changing. It's kind of like people who claim to have seen mythical creatures here in this world. Some people go out and brag to the whole world that they've seen it. Others, the ones that I'm more inclined to believe are the ones that are more secretive, and they're silent about it because they don't want it, because they're still trying to come to terms with it. It's shaken them that much that they dare not even utter the words that they have seen something. So in Bo-Katan's case, this makes perfect sense, but I don't like that this just makes one more thing that we're pushing off. That's the thing that I'm not much of a fan of. Mm-hmm. Jared Thorne mentions maybe the holiday specials when the creature was seen. I don't think so. I just did a search for that actually while Roland Chairs was talking, and there's a creature in there, but it's not labeled as a mythosaur. So, but there are some interesting creatures in the background that very well have not really been labeled one way or the other. And
Like
there
the
are
old holiday
creatures
special or
like the
newer ones?
old holiday special, old holiday
Oh, geez.
special. So there are creatures like that in Star Wars that we don't have any sort of reference that is actually cataloged, and we're just waiting for somebody in the show itself to actually draw the parallel for us to actually say, yes, this is that creature. But that is a good point. There are creatures actually like that throughout the series that, for all we know, we could have actually seen this thing. I know that there was actually a comic that came out years ago that apparently did have a mythosaur, but it's not the same design. But in terms of show, I don't know if any show that has had this design. So moving on to the next part here, they take off from the planet Mandalore and start heading back to Bo-Katan's planet, to her castle, so Din can get his ship and they can move on. Now, while they're traveling back, they get intercepted, literally, by Imperial interceptors, which is interesting to me because interceptors are designed to be super fast. They should have been able to catch up, lock on missiles, and destroy this craft, but that is not what happens here. Instead, they kind of act like TIE fighters, kind of zipping around. And then they have a dogfight in space and on the planet. And this frustrates me whenever they have a story element that really needs to be drawn forward and they interrupt it with action. The reason why this action troubles me in this sense is because it makes no sense why they would need to, why these TIE fighters would now, these TIE interceptors would now actually engage Bo-Katan. Why did they wait till this moment? Why didn't they just have why didn't they have this a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago? Bo-Katan mentions that she's angered a lot of warlords. So why did they wait till now? We don't really have that explanation. And we're left thinking that there's more to this when she says that's a lot that's a lot of interceptors for a warlord, which makes us wonder if maybe this actually belongs to a different entity entirely. But again, why wait till this moment to destroy her fortress? I'm left confused. Any insight, rolling chairs into this one?
They literally invaded Moff Gideon's ship. Do you think there would be some sort of bounty placed on all these individuals, like after doing such a thing, that they would not be able to roam safely? Like there would always just be some person kind of hunting after them after doing this to Moff Gideon, instead of just them roaming casually. Obviously, they don't have the same power they did now in the past because there's the New Republic and stuff, and they're not able just to go to any planet and just enact their power or execute any person who's a threat to their power. But I agree, it doesn't make sense why they'd wait till this moment in time. You think right after that would happen, they'd be a target by the remnants of the Empire. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
Was it me, or were those interceptors moving kind of jerky, says Jared Thorne. So interceptors definitely move faster. They maneuver faster. But I will say that the animation of this dogfight wasn't one of their better ones. They've done better in the past. So who knows? Maybe if you notice some of it kind of jumping around, it could have been that they didn't have time to perfectly track the scene. That is indeed a common problem that can happen for a show like this. I did see an animation a couple of years ago where they were trying to track a scene and they ran out of time, and then they quickly had to throw in some CG cars, and it didn't turn out so well. but they were kind of showcasing that this is how you kind of can quickly fill up a street with a bunch of cars, even though they're kind of sliding around the place in strange ways. So if you did see something like that, that might have been where it was coming from. But as they are going through this combat, then Din jumps out of the craft to go to his N1. He lands down there, gets in, and takes off just before he's blown to pieces, which is very convenient. But again, that made for actually a pretty good action sequence. He flies the N1 into the air and then treats it like an old World War I or World War II fighter, and stalls out, turns around so he can shoot the TIE interceptor that has been following him. The interceptors look much better than Return of the Jedi, I believe is what you're referring to. The interceptors were actually very well modeled. But I do get a little curious about if they know how to properly use interceptors in these films. In the games, they use interceptors correctly. Basically, they're the Imperial version of the A-Wing, as I understand. But they never get used quite in that way. So I would be curious if they will start to use these ships a little bit more and have them a little bit more aligned with what their actual purposes are in these shows. It doesn't seem to happen, which is unfortunate. It always seems to be that Disney just throws in spacecraft and says that's good enough. It's kind of like the N1, actually. N1 is not a very good craft for a bounty hunter, but they just threw it in because they're like, hey, we need a spacecraft. This one looks cool. Let's do it. But this doesn't fit for a bounty hunter. Oh, well, that doesn't really matter to them. They'll just quickly mod it up and make it look fancier, and that way you won't think about the logistics behind actually having that craft.
And my thing is, these ships, they can't travel across the galaxy. Like, they're meant for like close range combat type things. Like, you take a huge ship and then send them. You take a huge ship there and then release these ships to go attack for combat. So Moff Gideon's not there. So we know Moff Gideon isn't the person who's piloting the base ship. So maybe it's Thrawn, who is now hunting these people down. We're gonna see. Maybe we'll get Thrawn introduced in this season, and which could be interesting. But who knows what they're gonna do? Because you really wonder, like, how did all of them get there in the first place? Like, someone had to be tracking them down and figuring all this out in some way. So yeah, I have a ton of questions about the TIE Fighter's presence there, definitely. Or the interceptors.
Let's take a moment to actually pull that Thrawn possibility there, because I see Jared theorizes that might be the case too. I'm not so sure it would be Thrawn, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a First Order build-up, because of what happens later on in this episode. Now, the reason why I kind of doubt that it would be Thrawn is because we would have had some sort, well, this is Disney making it, so maybe not, but we would have had some sort of reference up until this point that would have told us that Thrawn existed in, maybe he was defeated, but if he existed in the First Order rose, that kind of doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense to have the New Republic just kind of not even acknowledge the threat and just kind of be willy-nilly going through life, and then suddenly the First Order appears, but Thrawn had been there the whole time. I kind of doubt that would be the case. If they are introducing Thrawn, I don't think it's going to be very good for fans of the Thrawn trilogy or saga, or however many books are associated with it. But I kind of think that would be a disappointment for them, because that would mean that Thrawn would have appeared and disappeared in a very small fraction of time, and as I understand, is a fairly impactful storyline, and it would have left its scars on the galaxy.
Yeah, but we never really see the New Republic addressing any of these things.
Hmm.
This is really the first we're seeing the New Republic. They don't even talk. We've never seen them really talk about Gideon. The only person we've seen talk about Gideon is Cara Dune. She's just a soldier, pretty much, in the grand scheme of things. Not like a political person who's like planning all this stuff out and how to combat it. But she's just on her own, a warrior within the whole thing. But yeah, we've never seen them really the New Republic or anything talk about any of them. But I honestly think this season's gonna be a huge surprise. I think we're gonna have tons of characters introduced in this season. I think now that we're on Coruscant stuff and doing political stuff, I think we're gonna see. I think they're gonna surprise us and bring Leia and see. We're gonna see her on Coruscant trying to guide the New Republic. I think we're gonna see Thrawn show up. I think we're going to see tons of stuff in the season. I think they're trying to keep it all a surprise, but that's just a theory. There's no reason for me to think that, but I think they're gonna do
Well,
something shocking
Jared
to try and bring people into it.
Jared does mention that Ahsoka is looking for Thrawn, which is correct. But
Yeah,
I guess the people I know who are a fan of the Thrawn storyline, from everything I know, it's a fairly complex story. And I can't help but think that it'd be too much to try and focus it in here. It feels like they're trying to build up for something else entirely. But again, how they're going to tie that in with the sequel trilogy that Disney has made, good luck, Disney. That's going to be a very tough one.
yeah. Thrawn is definitely going to show up in the Ahsoka show whenever her show releases, and we'll probably get Ezra Miller then too from the Rebels show. Uh, but I feel like it could end with an appearance of Thrawn. Like we're just gonna get like the last episode, we just see Thrawn and we see that. I think they're gonna continue to be chased throughout the season, hopefully, and hunted down, and then at the end we find out it was Thrawn doing it all, and then that would be kind of the build up to the Ahsoka show, where Ahsoka will come and help with the Thrawn situation.
So in this dogfight, as we are going back to the show here, we have
Oh yeah, Jared.
fairly
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, we have a fairly.
Call them Ezra Miller.
Oh,
Desert Bridger.
yeah, Bridger. This planet is
Ezra
interesting
Miller.
to me. It's a fairly lifeless planet, even though there's grass around, which kind of reminds me of that. There's a lot of these planets that we arrive to in Disney's version of Star Wars that doesn't feel like they're alive. Besides having a fairly dead castle that Bo-Katan lives on, I'm not seeing any sort of wildlife. I'm not seeing any sort of foliage other than grass. Why is she living here? Where is the culture? Where's anything? Right now, it just feels like she's out in the middle of nowhere, kind of like Luke Skywalker hiding out on his little island. But at least he had little creatures around that kind of told you that, there's more to that region than just him being there. We don't get any of that introduction around here, which is, I think, a missed opportunity. We end up finishing off the fight, and then they look over and they see that Bo-Katan's castle has been attacked. And so they go back, and she says that they've destroyed my home. Well, honestly, you didn't have much of a home there. I mean, it's a fairly empty place, so I don't know if it was that detrimental that you lost that place. Unless you really wanted that servant droid that was there.
There's something really confusing. She said when she's talking to the R5 droid, she says, "I grew up flying on this planet," which I thought from my perspective, I thought that she didn't go to that planet until Rebels and like as almost like a place to escape Mandalore after it was being like attacked by the Empires. I didn't think we never really knew anything or saw anything about her having any connection to this planet. It was kind of just a safe home after the casualties that they endured on Mandalore. But it's weird. We saw her have more sadness and stuff over this castle than she did going through Mandalore, where she
Mm.
actually spent her childhood, which is really weird to me. She seemed upset about this castle being bombed, but I don't know. It was really confusing to me.
That's actually a really good point. The fact that she doesn't have any sort of emotion over Mandalore, and yet she's torn apart by this. Golly,
Mm.
that's not reading your script very thoroughly for the actress playing Bo-Katan. That was all on her. You didn't need a director to tell you that there needed to be more emotion in another scene. Now, granted, the director should have told her that, hey, this is not as important as Mandalore, but they needed fake drama. And so they needed a reason for her to want to drop everything and chase after the TIE bombers. She does. Fires off one missile, takes out one of them, and then is trying to deal with the rest of them. And suddenly, where is that? So they're going forward, takes it out, and then suddenly all these new interceptors appear on the horizon. Well, that means that they have to get out of there as quickly as possible, so they use jump coordinates that Din gives her, and they just disappear. They go off into space, and they escape. But lo and behold, let's quickly jump over to the other side of the galaxy and see what's happening on Coruscant. This is a very interesting transition. By the way, the transition's good, but it is so very jarring for those of us watching it. And when I watched it the second time, I thought it would make more sense. It didn't. There are other times where I've seen clips of this show where something is thrown in there that I originally didn't like, or transitions that I originally didn't like, and I actually came to appreciate it afterwards. This one, I did not have any such fondness over, or any sort of reluctance to saying, yes, it was good. This one was just flat out bad. And lo and behold, we go to a very iconic location. This place is the theater where they were performing. If you know your behind the scenes lore, they were performing Squid Lake during the Revenge of the Sith, and now it's a show. It's a showroom for people to come and give speeches. Honestly, a good idea, but they could have given us a totally different building. They didn't need to bring us back to this one. They just wanted the nostalgia part of it. And we're seeing this character entering this building, and we don't really know who it is other than they have this emblem on the shirt. This right here is the character Elaine Kane. Aaliyah, what is it? Aaliyah Kane. Aaliyah Kane. There we go. Aaliyah Kane enters and goes in to see Dr. Pershing giving a lecture on his experiments and on his work in the Empire, and why he has rejected it in order to come and now serve the New Republic. It's honestly a good scene, for all things considered. When this scene started, I began to get actually kind of hopeful. I thought, well, maybe they are going to create something. Now, sure, the setting's odd, but maybe I can kind of let it slide. But then he starts mentioning some things that really doesn't make sense from a lore aspect, because as he's describing his work for the Empire, he starts saying about the cloning efforts that he has been doing. And he starts talking about merging different strands of DNA for a perfect specimen, basically. In his efforts to try and do this, he actually I don't know, unknowingly, Disney has thus undone all the work of the Kaminoans, making their work seem obsolete. Kaminoans had already done what he's describing. They were modifying genetic code, which is how we got the clone army. They had been doing it to their own species for centuries, which is how they became so good at cloning. So Disney just didn't quite understand how it is that the Kaminoans cloned, and so thus when this character is describing his work, it doesn't feel very authentic. It feels like he might be even a robber of the technology and claiming to actually be doing something that the Kaminoans had already mastered. So a little tone deaf in terms of the lore for Disney. Let's see here. Going back here, Jared mentioned that maybe Bo-Katan was on Mandalore than Concordia with Death Watch. I honestly wouldn't know. She was with Death Watch on Concordia in the Clone Wars. Ah, okay. That would probably make a little bit more sense. Bo's castle is on another planet in the Mando system. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. So, while we're finishing up the scene, we are thus introduced to how the New Republic kind of functions. Right now, we're kind of given this idea that Coruscant is full of bureaucrats and people are not really all that passionate about being on one side or the other. For them, this is all political theater, so to speak. And one of them says something actually a bit telling of how Coruscant actually thinks. He mentions that he can't keep track of who's in charge. Is it the Empire? Is it the Republic? Is it the New Republic? They're all one and the same to him. That actually is pretty accurate to how I would see Coruscant. They don't really care as long as they're the center of the universe. And so, to them, that actually makes a lot of sense. Now, there's one thing I forgot to mention, and that is during the presentation, Pershing touches his ear, and we see a scar. And at least on my first watching, I thought, well, I have no idea what that is. I still have no idea what it is, but I have some theories based upon what I've seen online. But he touches his ear, and he actually does this a couple times in the episode, thus drawing attention that something is wrong with his ear. Then we get to see the character Dr. Pershing heading on back to his lodgings. In this scene, Rolling Chairs, I'll let you kind of talk about this scene and the next one a bit. But for me, the one thing I will say is that this scene felt very peculiar because it was trying to add some culture to the world of Coruscant. But when we're introduced to the pilot of his vehicle, it kind of makes Coruscant feel even more dead. At least to me, it makes it feel even more dead, almost like it's a corpse of the Empire than a thriving city.
It feels like, if you go to a super touristy area, they'll give you like some of the big name locations, but like if you're just like traveling through, just like, oh, this is something you can kind of get a glimpse into, but it's not gonna like give you a glimpse into the real culture of Coruscant. So it didn't seem super unrealistic because like I feel like there's some similarities to that like in the real world and our world, but like with him like mentioning the museums and such, the places to visit, but you don't really see much of like how of like the people and how they're like their culture on this planet. But I don't know if that's what they're intending, but that's the way I interpreted it. But I did like his reaction. Like he's kind of just like after living this life within the Empire, just seeing like this whole kind of supposedly thriving planet. Like it's like a whole new world to him, and you can kind of see him like when he's interacting with people after there's at that show area. Uh, yeah, he doesn't seem quite too comfortable with it yet. Like he's having trouble adjusting. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. I kind of like his story for the most part. I like him in this episode. Like he's just kind of this quiet character who's trying to figure out this transition from the Empire to the Alliance, and it's an interesting perspective to see it from someone who is actually a part of the Empire. Um, but yeah, speaking on that droid, it just felt like someone who like if you're walking down some place you've never been, it's just someone on the side of the street being like, "Go to this haunted forest. Go to this, museum," and just kind of like giving you like the surface of what you can get here. But if you stay there for kind of a few months, you'll understand the true culture of this place, type of thing.
Mm. Actually, that makes me want to address something else about this, about all this. Let's see, skip forward a little bit more. There we go. That droid is a bit terrifying, which is by design. This episode is designed to make Coruscant and the New Republic not feel as genuine or caring as we have come to believe. Right after Return of the Jedi, we're expecting everywhere to be perfectly wonderful, and this droid right here was my first realization that the Coruscant we are on is not anything like what we have seen in the past, and that they are very much kind of becoming a sort of dystopia. And that's what I saw with this character. And lo and behold, as we went on into this episode, I started getting that gut feeling more and more. We come to this next scene. Say what you're going to say.
Isn't that kind of similar to the prequels, though? Like, it's a seemingly thriving society and government, but then you have someone like Palpatine who is infiltrating it from within, which is kind of the vibe I'm getting from Leia or whatever. Like, I think she still sympathizes with the Empire, and I think she's trying to do whatever she can to climb the ranks and try and dismantle the New Republic from within. Instead of fighting them in space with ships, he's trying to dismantle it from within. Even if it means betraying some of the people who she was on this fighting with previously, which is Dr. Purvish. Like it's seemingly a thriving society, but there are people within who are taking advantage of it and trying to get its downfall. But I don't know. I kind of took your point in a different direction, but I feel like even with the prequels, when you see the Republic, it wasn't the most perfect place. Like,
oh yeah, no, I'm not referring to. Actually, I'm not referring to that. I'm more referring to, kind of the coldness. So up until this point, the Coruscant felt a little cruel. This feels cold and lifeless. And that's the thing that kind of got me, is that there were corrupt individuals on Coruscant galore. As you go to cities, it tends to be that corruption wants to gather there. There's a sense of power, and it draws all sorts of people like that. But this robot and the following robots that we see throughout this episode starts to introduce this idea of that Coruscant is hands off. They don't want to touch anything. They want these droids to kind of go about and do the job for them. They want to live in their little utopia, but in doing so, it's becoming a dystopia. That's what I was kind of sensing with this droid. And it will make more sense when we come to the next droid as well, because it gets worse. Well, when we get back to the compound, Dr. Pershing meets with others who have left the Empire. They are now working for the New Republic. They are trying to start a new life. And as they are there, he sees the character we saw at the very start, Elia Kane. He recognizes her and says, well, I didn't realize that someone from Gideon's ship would be here. Well, he's one to speak. He was on Gideon's ship for a while. But so anyway, he mentions that, and they all kind of gasp, so to speak, that, wow, she was actually part of Gideon's ship. I heard that he had his mind flayed. I heard that he never got captured, sort of thing. So the rumors are abounding. Jared says, I think she's working to help cover up Palpatine's backup plan. Possibly. We're actually going to come to her character and her reasoning at the very end, because there's something truly interesting about this character arc that I would be honestly a bit surprised if they put this much thought into it. But anyway, we'll come to her character in a little bit. But while they're there, they decide that they're going to toast to the New Republic. And it kind of shows that they're leaving that life of the Empire behind. And they start mentioning about what sort of things they miss from their time in the Empire. And one of the things that that Dr. Pershing mentions is he misses the yellow travel biscuits. And so is very much focusing on these biscuits as a story point. At which point, Elia Kane mentions, oh, I like the red travel biscuits, giving us a distinction between the two characters. That's actually kind of an interesting little Easter egg that they pull forward throughout throughout this story. Let's see here. In this scene, just saying, I'm trying to catch up with my notes here. One of the things they mentioned is that when they see Dr. Pershing, is they say, oh, you're part of the program. The pins on your uniform make it hard to hide, but in reality, they all have them. So why did they put such an emphasis on the pins? They needed a way to get Dr. Pershing to come over and say hello to them. One other thing that's in this scene, sellable drinks. I don't know if Disney's actually going to do this, but I did notice that they did have very iconic drinks that I can't help but look at it and wonder if that's going to be something that appears at Galaxy's Edge.
Oh, they will definitely sell this at their bar at Galaxy's Edge. 100%.
Mm-hmm. There's actually a lot of food and drink that they've been introducing into these shows. Things that I can't help but wonder if they're trying to do it because a lot of these foods, up until this point, have never been on screen. George Lucas didn't do it. As I understand, the Clone Wars didn't really do it. And even the sequel trilogy didn't really do it. And so these shows feel like they're trying to do product placement for stuff in the future, or trying to put a face on some of these things that up until this point haven't existed. Disney loves merch. 'Tis true. 'Tis true, Jared. One other thing I'm a bit perplexed by, it is their response when they're talking about the Empire. They are so ready to abandon the Empire. They're putting it down. It sounds like they've been abused by the Empire, but yet at the same time they have a fondness for it. They are missing a great story arc here, one that actually would help out their sequel trilogy. But as far as I've seen in their episodes, they've not really focused on this plot line, and it's a shame because there's actually a lot that they could do here. Because when you have your world of ideologies come crashing down, it can be jarring. And you can spend a lot of time trying to praise what you're going to because it helps you to avoid thinking about what you're running from. They could have actually focused on that because of what transpires later on in this episode. We'll come back to this one again at the very end because this is actually goes with Elia Kane and her backstory and character development.
I did like this scene kind of though. Like the, it's not like they're like reminiscing like gosh, I miss the Empire, but these people they all have this connection that they were a part of the Empire that is now fallen, and it's kind of just interesting seeing, not like a Darth Vader or Emperor Palpatine perspective of the collapse, just seeing someone who would be like a janitor on the Death Star type situation, like what they think about it all. And I thought it was kind of interesting just kind of see them talk about it. And it's something that, if they went across Coruscant, they couldn't have this conversation with other people. They wouldn't understand their perspective. But this is just something that only these people can have this conversation together with at this point in time. So I kind of like this scene, to be honest. And if the Empire won, and I like the contrast, like, if the Empire won, then the Empire definitely would have executed all the rebels and gotten rid of them all. Whereas the New Republic is trying to do like this forgiveness thing and give people another chance to assimilate into this society, this new society, under their rule. So I think it's very interesting to see kind of these different perspectives of people who were a part of it, trying to, kind of talking about stuff they went through, and there were little things like the food they ate and such things. But yeah, I kind of like this scene, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. This scene was great. Unfortunately, based upon where it was placed, I felt like there was a missed opportunity. Missed opportunity. Because I think, yeah, they definitely could have really focused on that. We then see a new scene over here of where Dr. Pershing is listening to this device in his hands, and it's giving us actually really good information about Coruscant. And it's something that I wish would have been done more in the original Star Wars, that they would have actually had some sort of information moments. It's kind of like about like when you think about Pokemon, for example, and Ash Ketchum whips out his Pokedex whenever he sees a new Pokemon. We need those moments at times because the world of Star Wars is fairly large, and people who are unfamiliar with a story probably do get confused. And so this device is a good addition. I wish they would have done it more. He hears a knock at the door. He gets up, and he finds this box. He opens up the box, and he finds yellow travel biscuits. This is actually a really good addition to the scene because it shows that these folks have a nostalgia for where they came from. It gives them more heart and soul, I think. And by having something as simple as a biscuit, it kind of goes to show also that it was the small things that they missed. They were oblivious to the big grand scope of what was actually happening. But for them, it was having colleagues that they could rely upon. It was having a purpose in life. It was having things like this that helped to brighten up their day, no matter where they were in the galaxy. Good addition. Good addition. Oh, and that reminds me of one more thing. Before we get too much further, I need to better organize my notes here. This guy in the middle mentions something a bit silly. He says one of the things that he misses from the Empire is the lights of hyperspace. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Rolling Chairs, but the lights of hyperspace, according to lore, would have made someone go insane if they spent too much time looking at that. There's a couple of videos about that kind of hint that hyperspace can cause hyperspace sickness or whatnot. And so the fact that he says that kind of tells me that Disney has retconned that information beforehand, or they're just oblivious that that stuff existed beforehand. Now, granted, it wasn't ever really addressed in the films, but it is something where I did find that an interesting thing to add into the story.
Well, even so, like that's not something that's just special to being a part of the Empire. Like it's not like only the Empire could
Hmm.
use hyperspace. Like he can do that. He can almost do that now. Uh, Whereas like the biscuits thing or something, he didn't think he was gonna have access to those things until it just was surprised at his door. But he can go on some ship and or some bus type thing across the galaxy in
Hmm.
hyperspace. Uh, it is just like why is it like I didn't really get that. God, I'm glad you brought that up.
By the way,
It was
travel
really
biscuits coming to a Galaxy's Edge near you.
yeah, it'll be like some graham cracker type thing.
Yep. So
It didn't look like bread.
then we get to see what Pershing is doing during his daytime. He is helping to decommission and process information of the Empire so that the New Republic can thus scrub any trace of the Empire from the public knowledge base, you could say. They're taking anything that had the stamp of the Empire and throwing it away. Now, this is actually really odd, but it makes a lot of sense too. When you are the conqueror and you've been victorious in battle and you're dealing with the ruins of your opponent, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to do like what the United States did when they defeated Germany. They took the tech and ran with it because they knew that they had a new foe that they were going to deal with. Or you're going to approach it the way that Rome did with Carthage, and they realized that there was no other great empire in the area, and they salted Carthage and made sure no one could live there again, almost in vengeance, you could say. The New Republic is somewhere in the middle. They're choking on the politics of the planet, and they are blindly just destroying everything, which is actually a very interesting plot line. They could have put more into this. Again, we'll come to this thread at the very end because this is going to be part of something that all gets linked together here. But I do find it interesting that they do focus on the fact that all that this guy is doing is basically deleting. He's just deleting everything that he has, everything that people like him had strove to create, which then sparks him wanting to try and resurrect some of his old work. This is the good part of this episode that I really wish they would have focused on. But all this feels very jarring to the story as a whole of Mandalorian. But this plot line in itself is actually really good.
And kind of like adding on to what you're saying earlier, this whole place feeling cold. I don't exactly feel like they're trying to do that with just Coruscant's culture, but with the New Republic in general. Like here, he's just some box. There's someone in the office cubicle doing this work that he's not quite happy with, or feel like he's truly helping the Republic, and he's eventually ends up getting punished for trying to do what he thinks is going to help the Republic. Um, and they go to that little festival thing, and he tries to touch the mountaintop, and he gets punished for it. Like it's like little things, like go touch that, yeah, go touch that mountain peak. It's the Republic. You can live life. And then this drone shows up and is like, stop it. It's like little things like that where they're like, they're not restricting you to live, but there's still restrictions within this republic, and it seems like the very tiny things where they're like, yeah, there's still the republic isn't just everyone doing as they please type thing. Like there's still many type of restrictions from doing what you please. And with this cubicle job, they really try to. So it seems kind of depressing. Like they keep bringing him those discs and stuff, and maybe he was upset because he was deleting everything that they did in the past, what he was once part of. But It just seemed like the way I interpreted it is just like he was not, instead of doing this science stuff, he was just sitting in his cubicle and doing the same thing over and over and over again instead of doing what he think it could actually help. And then when he eventually does it, he gets punished. It feels like they're trying to make the New Republic not seem like the good guys, like they're still very flawed. Not just Coruscant, kind of branching off what you said earlier, but taking it to a different, not just Coruscant culture, but with the New Republic in general.
The New Republic is definitely being made out to be far more nefarious than we believe after Return of the Jedi. Basically saying that the victor doesn't always have it easy. And actually, there's truth in that. And honestly, if George Lucas wanted to carry the story forward, that is what he very well could have done. He could have focused on that victory is not always something that's going to give you everything you want. Sometimes it gives you a very brief moment of everything that you ever dreamt about coming to reality. And very quickly it falls apart. We here in the United States have kind of experienced that throughout the years, that victory doesn't always mean success. By the way, data cards coming to a Galaxy's Edge near you. That also will be a merch item based on how much detail they put into those things. And by the way, I do find those pretty interesting. So pretty good collector's item. But that being said, product placement in these episodes feels all the more purposeful because of how simple everything else is. So that's why it stands out to me so much. You'll see a scene like this and you'll see travel biscuits over here. You see data cards right here. Oh, the computer back here, it's blurred out, so you can't really see it. But the data cards are in focus, as are the travel biscuits. Interesting placement there. So he goes off, and they have this scene that you hinted at earlier, rolling chairs, but this scene is where the whole episode fell apart for me. Because this is a park of some kind. It's made out to be like Disneyland, and they use the very music that you can hear in Disney. If I remember right, the music is from the Innovations Plaza in Epcot. They use the music with a different... They play it just slightly different, but every note is the same. And that's when I realized I was watching a giant advertisement. Because they arrive there and they have a new merch item. These glowing popsicles. You can bet those also will appear. Yeah, they looked horrible.
You could have just they use I thought it was like a Jello type thing. The way they bit into it. They could have just put Jello. They could have put like a stick with a glow stick on it and then put Jello around it, and it would have looked much better than.
Oh, but they had to have it frozen though, because when Disney sells it, it's going to be on a hot day, and people are going to flock to go get them.
Well, even so, they could have made it practical effects instead of this crappy CGI. Like they could have just done like this. I don't know what material they would use, but the tiny thing like that could easily be done with practical effects, and it just looked so bad. Like especially when they're biting into it, it just did not look real at all. Like
I'm going to say that maybe this was changed. I'm going to guess that they didn't really know what these things were going to look like, and so they were just kind of putting something as a stand-in, possibly. But those things actually are there. They're just given a very bad glow effect because they probably did not, because they didn't glow. These things were likely the actual product that you would have purchased at Disney. Yes, I do actually think that we might see this thing sooner rather than later. They probably had the actual product that they were chewing on. No, they were just sucking on because it's frozen. but they had to make sure that it didn't melt on scene, so thus they would have had it probably as plastic. But they wanted to add some more interest to it, so they put in a light in the middle, but then they realized the light wasn't bright enough, and so they had to digitally enhance it using a mask effect in After Effects or another equivalent program. It's a very bad effect, and one that I'm very familiar with because I also did those very bad effects once upon a time. So they're
It's like
chewing on these things, and they're going forth to try and kind of de-stress from their life of, and they're talking back and forth about a variety of subjects, but it just feels so disingenuous.
mhm. That place looks so depressing. Like comparing, like in kind of in House of the Dragon, which is a show that released last year. The These royalty, they sneak out of the castle and they go into the the just into the streets of their kingdom, and they see just tons of different stuff, kind of similar to this, like magic, kind of like these free characters who are just like doing shows on the side of the street, some like street theater type stuff, and it was such an interesting perspective into the kingdom. But when you can, and it was still in kind of this depressing area, like these people, they're definitely poor, especially related in comparison to these royalty who are walking amongst them at that point in time. But you kind of see like a very interesting view into the kind of culture of what's being brewed in King's Landing. But with here, it's just concrete, and they just look over, and then there's just this little like shell of just this person pulling this alien out from under a napkin, and there's just like nothing around it. It's just, I'm not saying like the concrete is the point part. It's just there's so much. It just it felt so cold, kind of like what you're saying earlier. It was just, I was kind of looking at it. I was like, geez, this is kind of depressing. And this is supposed to be like where people go to get entertainment, like almost like a circus type thing, and it was just not that at all, at all.
It feels very dystopian in that sense, or like it's a utopia that's turning to dystopia. I
Yeah.
was going to say it kind of feels like modern day America in a way, but that's another subject for another day. By the way, this magician pulling out this alien dragon creature from underneath this handkerchief. Come on, Disney. That's an that is very much a Western trick that is used by magicians here in the modern day. It's stretching back to centuries ago. Chances are they're not going to use the same trick because everybody would have known this trick. This is far off in the future. So would they really have magicians? Honestly, they probably wouldn't. They probably would try to show off new types of tech and what it can do. That's what
What Star Wars
Coruscant
is
would
in
have
the
done.
past?
This
Star Wars
is
is
Outer
in the
Rim
past.
sort of joking.
Isn't
So,
Star Wars in the past, not the future?
well, it's in the past, but it's an advanced civilization. So,
Yeah.
advanced civilization
Yeah.
that should have like been aware that this is a trick. That's what should have happened.
Yeah, it looked so bad. Like there was, you think he'd be taking advantage of some of the technology and stuff to truly kind of like build an experience that's only can be created there, type of thing. It's just,
So,
it looked, that whole scene was so depressing, honestly. This
so
whole
here's something to remember
park
also.
scene.
Coruscant would not probably be too fond of the New Republic. They are very much a corrupt culture, and if they're going to a place like this, chances are they're not going to be doing tricks like this in the streets. They're going to want to showcase freaks. That's the sort of people Coruscant likely would be, and those are the sorts of folks they probably draw. So I would more likely have expected them to be showcasing some sort of oddity from around the galaxy, and that would have been considered more entertainment to this very cold people who willingly kind of let the Empire rule everything as they kind of basked in the fortunes that fell upon their planet. I can see how the original small band of rebels couldn't control the galaxy after the Empire fell. Yep, that is true. Besides poor writing, there is a rabbit out of a hat, but it's not a rabbit. Yes, precisely. So as I'm walking around this place and still listening to Disney music from the Innovation Plaza, they see something that honestly is a really good addition to Coruscant. They see this, the tallest mountain peak on Coruscant. All that's left of the surface. Now, by the way, I don't know if this is actually what happened, because if you look at, let me pull up an image of this. Coruscant from air. Let me see if there's any images that exist of this. Sorry, what was that?
I just spilled my water all over my notes.
Oh, that's not good. Okay,
right, continue.
I cannot find this image right now. This happened in episode 2 when we're flying into Coruscant with Count Dooku. And when he flies in, you look off into the distance and you actually see what looks like water. It looks like a small sea that somehow is been left over, which kind of makes sense because they still have rain on this planet. There's going to be water coming from somewhere. But when they say that this is the only place on the surface that you can really see anymore, that doesn't make sense, because logically you're going to have some sort of access to groundwater, and if you can see the water, then likely there's going to be a coastline around there, likely. So when they see this, they should just said this is the tallest peak, and that just tells us how high up Coruscant has been built. But that in itself is still a very interesting aspect of lore that they added in that I appreciated. What happened with it was not very good, as he pretends to suck on this frozen item that doesn't actually have anything on there. Because the character mentions, Elia Kane says, you're dripping, and so he quick sucks on it. And so I think that maybe they were trying to put in a drizzle effect, and it didn't quite work out. I don't know, but I did find that a little peculiar. He goes up
with things like that. It's important to have I think if you're gonna do CGI, I think it's almost important to. Obviously, I'm very pro. I like CGI, but you have to mix it with practical effects. So I think close-ups on things, just like a hand. If you're doing a ship that's CGI, just do a hand touching a part of the ship, and it can kind of just make it seem real. And then you zoom back out into the thing. They should have just tried to build this close to practical, credible as possible.
I think that you'd be surprised what is practical and what's not in this show, because a lot of the stuff is practical. Like the popsicle, but because they're acting on a stage, they don't want to actually be actual ice, and so thus they have to use plastic. But when they're going to when they're going to leave when they're going to leave in a line like that says you're dripping or whatnot, you would expect to see something on there, some sort of drizzle. But it's like they forgot it in the process of trying to rush out this episode. And this episode does feel a little rushed at times.
Yeah, and that dripping scene is where I do a close-up, just of the hand and the popsicle thing itself, and then you cut back out to the CGI version of it we got. But doing a close-up thing of it actually touching humans, it's literally real in their hands. That little bit of showing a real bit of it and then mixing it with CGI can go a long way with kind of subverting your expectations or whatever.
Yep. By the way, this shot right here, of where he is trying to touch it. And then he gets surprised by a robot that tells him that he's not allowed to touch it. Oh, I can't get to there. So up comes this robot and says, "You can't touch it." And he drops his popsicle, and he realizes the Republic also has kind of a problem of trying to control things. Anyway, he backs away, drops his popsicle, and again, the kind of to your point of practical effects, but this robot reaches down to grab the popsicle and says no littering, and you would have thought it would have left a mark on the surface, but it left nothing. So kind of a strange thing to do.
Yeah, it was just that CGI was like terrible, like Marvel level CGI.
Terrible that Marvel has become the low bar in all these on all these shows.
Mm-hmm.
We then see this scene right here. Now, this one is another one of those dystopian like robots that I kind of mentioned about earlier, where everything just feels dead, because this thing is terrifying. You do not want to look at something like that. It looks like a skull. It does not have the friendliness of C-3PO. It looks like it's going to tear your limbs off of you in a moment if you answer wrongly. I did not like this character at all.
It's almost supposed to be a therapist droid, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's posing as a therapist droid, but as a way of just to get information and keep track of these people who are being assimilated from the Empire into the Republic. But it just looked. If I was sitting there across that thing in a room, just this room of metal, I would be kind of scared and I think you kind of see that from him. Like, it seems like he might be lying to the droid at times because he thinks there's going to obviously be repercussions for saying his truth. It was just that thing is so creepy. The eyes on it, it looks like something out of that Johnny Depp movie where they go to Vegas and they just take a ton of drugs. Like, it looks so creepy, like some acid trip type thing.
So this thing does not look like it belongs in the world of Star Wars, not even remotely. One of the things that you'll see in Star Wars is that the eyes are lit up, but you won't see like where the camera of the eye actually is. This one, you can see where the camera of the eye is, and it feels very much like this thing is designed very much to end up in Galaxy's Edge. That's what it feels like. Because this is something you could actually see appearing out there. And I don't know.
What would it do, though?
I don't know. But this feels very much like it's designed to be like an actual thing you could produce here on Earth.
I felt that way about the magic shows. I think they're gonna start doing little shows type things in Galaxy's Edge,
Mm-hmm.
kind of just little bits like that. So when you're walking through it, you're like, oh, look at that little alien looking thing pulling a rabbit out of the hat or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that will be that, and the food and the drink and maybe those data card type things. They might sell some stuff like that. And they're obviously going to start selling Mandalorian helmets at some point at different sizes. But with this, I feel like even kids would look at that thing and be like, "What, Mom? Can you please get me away from this thing? This is creepy."
Precisely. I'm going to pull up that droid again. So this is what they want us to believe Coruscant droids look like. But this is what droids that actually were in the world looked like. They looked like C-3PO. They had all sorts of strange sort of gadgets and limbs based upon the society that was building it. And this thing felt like it was made by modern day engineers. Didn't feel fanciful at all.
I feel like it was supposed to look, trying to see it from Disney's perspective of where they're portraying the New Republic in this episode as kind of not perfect. It almost looks like they're trying to scare, even though they're trying to assimilate the Empire's put soldiers into their new society that they are now ruling over. It seems like they're like something like this, like in A New Hope or whatever, when they bring in that scary droid to try and get information out of Princess Leia or whatever,
Hmm.
with Darth Vader walking in. It almost seems like something like that, but like a new version of it, like something that is similar to other droids, but still kind of like a little scary. Something that like you'd give information to, or you're scared to not betray type of thing, because they're dealing with. I don't think this is something they would have on the streets of Coruscant. I feel like this is something that's especially programmed or whatever to try and keep ex-Empire soldiers or foot
Well,
soldiers or whatever
well, that's why I said
in
at the
line.
very start. That's why I pointed at the droid that was in the vehicle with him, because there are several droids throughout this episode that all have the same flaw of whether they're not
Yeah,
designed to look like they fit in this world. They're very cold. They're very, which probably is what they wanted. They probably wanted it to feel like that so the audience would understand the characters better. But yeah, it did not fit. But we'll come to one
I
last
didn't have
scene
any.
of the droids
Yeah.
here in a little bit here, because we have a very interesting scene which we're just going to kind of skip by because it's not. It's more of the same which has been happening around, which is the Doctor wants to start doing his work again, and he's being encouraged to do so, but he still has doubts. We then jump over to his work where he starts to realize this stuff is actually being deleted, and he asks about, is there a way that some of it could be preserved, and he's told no, we cannot do that, which again kind of fits well with how the New Republic would probably be behaving at this point. It actually does make sense, at least in terms of how this version of the New Republic is being portrayed. We then hear that they're decommissioning the Alliance fleet. This is said just kind of casually, which tells us that they do not see any threat on the horizon. The New Republic believes they have won everything. There is nothing that can challenge them. So that's actually a very important piece of information, which would have been really good as a precursor to The Force Awakens.
Well, that's what many of the mainstream media articles are saying. They're like, finally, we learned how the New Republic fell so easily, type
Yeah.
things, because they
10
were
years later.
almost arrogant. Yeah, they were almost arrogant, and there was no hint of that definitely in the Force Awakens or anything. That even if you go back in time and just watch the Force Awakens, you would kind of go with the mindset that, oh, the New Republic, it's like the power of the world. They're the government ruling over everything. But now you kind of get a different perspective where, oh, they were kind of arrogant, and which kind of doesn't make sense to me that they would feel that way, especially so close to uh, the Empire having rule over this place. Like you'd think they'd be almost too cautious, like very. You'd think almost there'd be people who are untrusting of people who are even good. It's like people would just question everything and be like there'd be so much like you would have trouble trusting people after such a thing with the Empire, like, and they just kind of treat it like, oh, yeah, that was whatever. I was here. I didn't get drafted. You
Especially
know.
when there's still Imperial ships flying around. And that's the thing
Hmm.
that's also a bit suspicious. Like, places are still literally being bombed to oblivion by TIE
Yeah.
bombers. TIE interceptors will come out and attack ships, which makes you wonder if the New Republic is lying to people and they want folks to believe that there is nothing left. Now, that could be what they're doing in that sense. They could be destroying everything because they want people to forget it.
Well, kind
But
of what I
they
was saying
need to
earlier.
they need to convey that information if they're going to be doing that route.
Well, kind of what I was saying earlier. I think they're going to do a very similar thing they did with Palpatine overthrowing the Republic, but not to that extent. I just think with the New Republic, I think they're going to be infiltrated from the beginning, and it's just that's going to just like there's no way they were ever going to thrive to their fullest or do what they hope to accomplish uh, on a humanitarian level. Like, uh, I think they're just anyone who was a part of the empire, and especially with the program, like with this amnesty thing they're doing. I think they're just giving way for people to infiltrate and kind of show their downfall. And I think it's definitely still going to be empire type people who lead to their downfall, not exactly the good people of the republic. But they're going to be. I definitely think they're taking inspiration from the prequels of the downfall
See,
of
I will
the New
actually
Republic.
counter that and say I don't think that they're even remotely referring to that. I think what they're trying to do is they're not showing how it gets taken over. I think they're trying to show that they never actually changed.
Mm,
Because from the very start, they're trying to they're confused about even who's ruling over them. Coruscant, I believe, is being made to have us believe that
interesting.
Coruscant is only Coruscant. Whoever is ruling over them, it doesn't matter. They see them all as the same. They're going to behave the same way.
But from a soldier perspective, you see the soldiers of the empire coming in. They're like when they're sitting at that table at their apartment complex or whatever. Uh, they're like the empire would never do this. If we were rebels and the empire won, the empire would have killed us uh, to get rid of us. But this new republic is giving us a chance to assimilate into society and hopefully contribute something. Uh, so I think there are going to be some people who view it as different, but even with but even though there is still downfalls in the republic, but with programs like this amnesty program, I think they're inviting people to just kind of take advantage of it and get involved with the New Republic. And I think they're going to, instead of a Palpatine character, I think there are going to be tons of foot soldiers who still sympathize with the Empire who are going to invade the New Republic and bring it downfall.
Jared Thorne mentions formation of a military was an early step in the fall of the Republic. Maybe they want to demilitarize, thinking that it will keep peace like the old days. Now, that's actually a good point. They might actually be under a false assumption. Now, granted, that is also how other nations will try and weaken another rival nation because they're trying to inspire them to get rid of their armaments, so that it will make a future war a lot easier for them. But regardless of where the New Republic and Coruscant stand, it rubs off on the Doctor in the wrong way, and he starts to become desperate to try and save his work. One thing that also happens here is that as we come to the next scene, oh, by the way, he pulls out some more travel biscuits. And these ones are white, which I found interesting, which I'm guessing they probably meant to be yellow. So,
Well, that was actually a very interesting part. He's just got dropped off these data pads and stuff, and all this work he needed to do, and you could kind of tell he was a little stressed or upset in that scene, and almost this comfort thing for him was this thing from the Empire, and that was what he, kind of when you're stressed out, someone might take a drink of water to kind of like hide what they're truly feeling or something. For him, it was taking a bite of this biscuit that brought kind of a peace to him from his past, and
that's a really good point.
it was a very interesting bit for me in that part. Honestly, I was like, oh, geez.
Another thing that happens is he ends up touching his ear again, which again we see
Mm-hmm.
as being damaged. And that happens in this scene right there. Because now he's talking with that terrifying droid again. And it's asking him what if he has any ill will towards the Empire, to the Republic. And he touches his ear. Again, hinting at something is going on with him. He then decides that he's going to go off and try and resurrect his old work, and he's going to go get some equipment. And Elia Kane is going to help Dr. Pershing get this. He then looks at himself in the mirror and says, "You're doing this for the New Republic." So he truly does think that he's doing the right thing. Kind of like what he probably would have done when talking to himself about that he's doing this for the Empire. Because in the end, he's not doing it for any entity. He's doing it because it's his work, and he is passionate about his work, regardless of the ethics behind it. He sees the travel biscuits, and then he moves off. They go out, and something interesting happens in this scene. They're at a train station, and some audio plays. And now this is actually quite interesting. This is an Easter egg that I'm not sure how many people would have caught it. Word for word, it is from Star Tours. It is the background voice. And there was actually a time where I could actually quote this. I have since lost that ability to do it. It's been several years, but that's how I recognize it. It's like, oh, it's from Star Tours. I looked back, and yes, it is indeed a clip that you can find in the Star Tours queue line, the original one. I don't know if it's still there. But he's getting nervous. He thinks everyone's watching him, typical of people that are committing a crime. He sits down, and they see this strange creature, and they are... they say something a bit bizarre. Where's that scene? Of course, I can't pull up that character right now. It's right when they enter. So they come in, they sit down, he looks up, and he sees this unique creature. No idea who this character is, but we get several good looks at him. And one of the things that Eli King mentions to him, she knows that this guy is looking at them, and so she says, "Tongs Day, am I right?" Tongs Day. Never heard of that term before. Is that Disney trying to create a catchphrase that they can be able to tell guests someday at Galaxy's Edge? You can bet. So it sounds like it's supposed to be a day of the week. I don't have any sort of understanding of what day of the week it's supposed to be, but I'm guessing it's a work week, and it's supposed to be something you say when you are when you've been working hard or something like that. So trying to build up lore, but it felt a little weird in this circumstance, but still a little bit better than some other ones. They proceed to travel, and Eli King tells Dr. Pershing that we are going to go to a decommissioned Star Destroyer, and we're going to take stuff from a lab. And that's when he realizes that they're actually going out to really take gear that is thus illegal to take because it is part of the Empire, and he's already been seeing that they've been destroying everything. So thus adding to the suspense of what he's doing is not seen as good in the New Republic's eye. He also learns that Eli King is the one that gave him the travel biscuits. Interesting. Got another good look at the character for whatever reason. And then they have this scene. Robots that come in to check for tickets. This feels very weird because why would they have this system on Coruscant? Somehow I think they would have a more effective system for checking tickets. We've never seen this before. And we could just assume that they had like an effective system for being able to scan and make sure that people there are supposed to be there. This feels outdated. But they needed something to spark a chase scene. So why... They could have just had security droids walking through. But no, they have to be checking tickets. Why? Who knows? Who knows? So they decide that they're going to run. Sorry?
because we needed to push the story forward.
Yes, we need to push the story forward. But again, I wish that they would have had actual guards, not these dead robots, which again don't feel like they belong in Star Wars. Their face looks very weird. It doesn't look like it belongs in this galaxy far, far away. They jump rail cars. They come in here, and the doctor says, "Tong's Day, am I right?" And they just give him a strange look. And something weird happens, and this is going to make sense later on. He says, "Tong's Day, am I right?" And Eli Kane looks and says, "We'll work on that." And they walk on. We'll work on that. Weird. Very weird. We see the robot again as chasing them, well, walking after them as they jump from car to car. And eventually they get to the end. They jump off the train and they meander on their way to the Star Destroyer.
I just say that jumping off the train bit, so unrealistic. Like, they would have broken almost every bone in their body.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what?
And they landed on a cushion that they couldn't see was there because they're moving too fast.
Mm-hmm. I liked the build-up, like the part where this robot was just kind of slowly meandering towards them. And it was kind of this build-up where I thought, like, oh my gosh, something's going to happen here. And then all that happened was just like, no, we're jumping off. I was like, I thought they weren't going to be able to jump off and they were going to have to deal with this situation in some other way. And they just completely, they had this build-up that was kind of interesting to me at least. And then they just threw it out the door and it kind of made everything else pointless. Like when you rewatch it and that whole build-up, you're just like, well, I know they're just going to jump off. Once they get to the end, there's no point in this robot being here or anything like that. It was just kind of stupid.
It is indeed
they
very
shouldn't
peculiar.
have jumped off.
Yeah,
they should have tried to find another way off.
Yeah, they definitely should not have jumped off. Should have found a different way, but they needed to have a basically by formula. They write by formula, and so thus the formula said they needed to do a chase sequence in the train. They needed to jump off to add a little bit of excitement because it's been too long without an action scene. Literally, that's how Disney thinks. Which they could have done something similar, but again, they could have had guards. And
well, it was very different.
It could have sparked something that would have been a tip off of what's to come, and they didn't.
Well, it was very different than their other action scenes where, the last episode, Din is just walking through Mandalore. Oh, these trolls show up and now he's fighting someone. Or, oh, this robot creature just comes from the dirt and traps him. Like, and then, like, this, like, there was actually, like, some build-up where you're like, oh my gosh, like, what's going to happen here? Like, how are they going to get out of this situation? And then it's just like, oh, they just literally jump off of a train that's moving like 100 miles per hour. It's like, what? Like, I really liked the build-up, but not the ending, the way they closed it off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's very different than the other action scenes.
Yeah. So they see the Star Destroyer, and they go down there, and no one's around. A planet of billions and billions of people. I don't remember what let's see here. Coruscant population. So according to Star Wars Wiki, the population of Coruscant is trillions. That's as much as they have. It is trillions of people spread over miles of city that goes vertically across the entire surface. Consists of trillions of citizens of a variety of species, some of them large creatures, most of them human size, and others that are small alien sizes, thus adding to the population a lot more in that sense. So trillions of people, and they couldn't spare a few people or robots to guard the Star Destroyer, which, by the way, is basically illegal for people to take any stuff from here. And if it's so important and it's decommissioned, there's still important things on here. You can take tech from this structure, and they're trying to get rid of the tech. So obviously something is wrong. Which someone could say, oh, well, that's going to play into the end of the episode. But others of us are like, no, that's just because you wanted to have this the infiltration scene, and you just came from an action sequence, so thus you can't have a second one. Things like that. They enter, they turn on the lights. They also have flashlights. And they find a lab. The lab then gives us some more insight into the Dr. Pershing as well as Elia Kane. Good scene overall in terms of building up more information about these characters' backstory, but it's cut short because why? We need a new action sequence, and we've missed out on multiple action sequences, so thus we're going to pack 2 within basically the same time frame. So they quickly have to rush, gather stuff, and they leave. And Elia Kane looks backwards and like, be quiet, shh. They listen as they hear people approaching. They turn around and they start to run, and they get out of the building. They get out of the structure, and they are confronted by the New Republic in their helicopter-like vehicle, which, by the way, doesn't feel very authentic to the world of Star Wars. They would likely have had a walker. They would have had maybe a robot hovering, but you wouldn't have this helicopter thing, other than the fact that Disney is trying to create something that looks like it belongs here on Earth. And by the way, this thing acts like a drone, but there's a man inside of it.
Face. When you look at it, the picture you have right there, it literally looks like a frowny face. But the crazy thing is, they literally have these robots patrolling the transportation of the people of Coruscant, but there's not guards, human guards, or any type of robots, any droids patrolling this site of a ex-Imperial ship, ex-Empire ship. Like, there would be so much security around that thing. Like, literally anyone from Coruscant could have gone into that thing and tried to steal things from it. There would be, at the very least, there would be some just droids just like flying through the thing, kind of scan the area constantly. Like, it would have been so much harder to get into that ship than the way they portrayed it.
Jared Thorne mentions try sneaking onto a decommissioned Navy ship. That's a good. That's actually a good reference. Security droid would be able to trigger a lockdown if it saw people evading it. Yes, very true. It could have just shut down the entire train. It would have actually signaled that, hey, there's something else here. But again, now we come to the part about this episode, which undoes everything in this episode. No guards. The place would be crawling with Jawas. Yes, it would be crawling with Jawas, wouldn't it? So they're confronted, and so it turns out this place has been monitored. Well, supposedly, but it wasn't. I mean, there's no one else in this entire block, and we saw there's like 9 Star Destroyers that are being decommissioned in this. And then it turns out Elia Kane had set him up. Ooh, backstab. Because it turns out that Elia Kane never actually was his friend. Actually was setting him up and said, look what you've done. You've relapsed, sort of thing. Turns around, grabs his gear, and walks away. This makes no sense. This scene destroyed every character buildup that these two have had to this point. Because if Elia Kane wanted to shame him publicly, why would Elia Kane say something like when they're on the train and he messed up on saying Tong's Day? We'll work on that. No, you're not going to work on it. You don't actually intend to help this guy. So thus, psychologically, you wouldn't even think to say, we'll work on that. You would have said something along the lines of, you look like an idiot right now, or something like that, or maybe you
Well,
shouldn't be the one that talks. Just something that would have shown a level of coldness, not like I intend to carry on this relationship with you.
well, I had a very different perspective because I thought they were gonna do the generic Disney thing, like, oh, we have a woman, she's a lesbian in real life. Like, obviously, she's gonna be this perfect character who's gonna do everything perfect, and she's gonna guide this person to accomplish what he needs to do, which is what they're kind of doing it, which I thought they were kind of doing the whole episode was they're kind of just doing this trope where she's pretty much going to accomplish his mission for him. But really, it was almost like a honeypot situation where kind of where she's just leading him to this trap, and I think she almost did it for her gain, like because I think whereas him, he has his doubts of the Republic and he's having trouble adjusting. He's not really anti-Republic. He's just doesn't really. He's having trouble acclimating to the situation. But I think she is taking advantage of this New Republic's their willingness to allow people from their enemies to really acclimate into their new society and try and let them contribute to this new society. She's doing whatever she can to push other people down, even if it was people who were on her side, as long as she can help the Empire or whatever the Empire was in the future New First Order.
But again, we wouldn't have the lines that she said up until this point. The whole
Well, I
time
think she's lying to him.
no. Think about this. They're in the heat of the moment. They're on a train. They're being chased. And she says, "We'll work on that." That's that's completely illogical, because you would have had a completely different term that says I'm going to keep engaging, and there was no need for that because they're being chased. No one's even going to care. The fact that you did that says to me, the fact that Disney did that says to me that somebody on the writing room floor didn't even know how the episode was going to end. Which, by the way, Disney is notorious for doing that with Marvel, where they don't even know how the film is going to end. So they do all these different takes, and some of them makes no sense completely because this problem of having multiple writers and not actually know what the end is going to be.
Well, I view that as she was just continuing to lead him to this trap that she was setting from the beginning. Like she planted the idea of I'm going to take you to the ship. Like the whole purpose of this episode was, and from my opinion, was that she was trying to convince this person to indulge in something that he loved, which was science, and taking advantage of the fact that he thought that this would help the Republic, even though it was illegal. She was like, just do it, it's for the better. But all in the process, she knew that she was guiding him to this trap that would benefit her. And Jared just said she could have just kept her mouth shut and let the security droid arrest him on the train. Well, she wouldn't get any credit for that. When she guides him all the way there and brings all the way to the ship, and when he has the paraphernalia in his hands, and she kind of gets all the credit for this situation, and she gets thanked for afterward. She was literally leading him to a trap that made her look better. She was literally willing to throw this person, and I think it's fully because she's an Empire sympathizer, and she doesn't care if she has to throw ex-Empire people under the bus because this is what she views as what's going to benefit the Empire most in the long term. Because she just views this person as, I feel like, this almost a side character who isn't going to benefit the Empire or anything in the long run, but she can benefit her climb to power within the New Republic, which can help her help the Empire in the long run.
But
I feel
now,
like
this is why I this is why I can understand why the character would do what you're referring to, but the way that they wrote the dialogue is not how you do it.
it's a liar. She's a liar.
But
She would say whatever she has to
but
continue
see
into this
now,
trap.
no, because it's when you're going to say these things that matter the most. This is something that I remember hearing about years ago, which is that in heat of the moment, people many times will make slip ups, and so if you really intend to help someone, it will show itself in the heat of the moment. Mostly because people are not going to be paying attention the same way. And it usually is an area where we as the audience could have gotten a little bit of a tip off that something's not right. But when they do something like that, that's trying to build this idea, not for the character to believe it, because the character is too focused on the droids coming up from behind. It's designed to make we, the audience, think that there's actually more to this character than there really is, which is not necessarily helping because that's just adding to confusion. The fact that it says we'll work on this, and
But
that's why
she's seen
that's
crazy things. This
but
train,
but
that's
that's why I
nothing to
said
her.
from the
That
very
droid,
start. That's why I said from the very start, this character is written as if they didn't even know where this character was going to end up. They wrote it blindly, not even knowing what the ending was going to be. Jared Thorne mentioned somehow Palpatine returned. It's actually the same sort of process where Disney writes something and they don't even know how it's going to be tied together, and then they just so happen to think on the editing room floor, oh, let's just throw this in. That will make things sound a little bit more interesting.
well, I don't think she was ever supposed to be this. I think she was supposed to betray him from the start, and I think those lines were just her being a liar and almost a very, very manipulative character, where even the audience can't see through her manipulation. Where because she's the one who guides him all the way to the ship. She gets him through the train door so he doesn't have to use his card or whatever to get through. She takes him all the way there, teaches him how to get to the ship. She's literally leading him to this trap that benefits her. And I don't think I agree that Disney does do that, especially for their Marvel products, where they just shoot stuff and try to edit it together in the end, and shoot along like they'll write stuff along the way and try and get a product out the door. But with this, I feel like they're kind of leaning into this trope where, oh, we have this perfect woman who's guiding him along this adventure that he's trying to do that this man can't do by himself. And we're supposed to be annoyed by it. And then they're like, oh, yeah, she's the bad person in the situation. She's taking advantage of this man. And I but I think she really did it. I think she said all those lines just to continue to be like, yeah, like if you're leading an animal to water, she's like almost like, yeah, there's water down there, or there's some food down there for you, and she's saying whatever she has to get this animal to that
I
water.
agree, but in writing, and this is something that I've learned through my time studying the whole process of writing. There are times where that makes sense. The scene that happened on the train, that's why I'm stressing the scene. I'm not stressing the other moments. The other moments make sense. The scene in the train destroys that model because suddenly,
Disagree.
but because in the end, when they have that scene, that displays poor writing. It shows that they don't know how to actually write a character to show betrayal. And so this character, who very well could have that sort of motive from the beginning in that sense for the audience to kind of think about, what if this person tried to use them? The wording
I don't think
that
they wanted the audience to know. There's supposed to be hints of suspicion because you can tell by the way she's staring at him and stuff throughout the whole episode. Like what's going on with this character? But I don't think you're ever supposed to fully understand, like, oh, yeah, she's going to betray him, before she actually does. I think they wanted that to be like a bomb dropped on type of thing, bomb drop type thing where you're like, what the heck? Like, oh my gosh, she just betrayed him. And I think you're supposed to wonder her reasonings for doing so and stuff. And I don't know. I guess we have a very different
yeah,
perspective
we
on it.
definitely have a different perspective on this one. But in terms of like if you were to consult someone who's like an expert in writing, they would say that the wording that was used is actually indicative of somebody who didn't know what they were writing. And that's the thing that I look at, is that is the wording that was used, that as a writer, there was so many better things that could have been used that would have been just as secretive for the audience to not know what was happening, that would have actually conveyed more to this character and the actual psychology behind someone who does something like this. That's what I find is really strange, because there's multiple scenes in this episode where upon a second watch, I realized there's a lot of scenes that really don't make sense, because we're not really seeing what this character is getting out of it. We don't really see why this character is
Not
so
yet.
quick. Yes, not yet, but we don't get any sort of hint as to what this character is getting out of this. We're not really seeing
But
the
well,
motivation
extent.
behind why this person's the point that this person's here to begin with. If Gideon sent her to do this, or there's very little backstory, which is again something I blame the Mandalorian as a whole for. In their writing, they don't think about where the characters are going, and so many times this happens. So I'm not looking at this with like there's some grand plan. I'm looking at this in terms of Disney has a reputation of
I understand that
doing this
perspective
sort of editing, so I
wholeheartedly.
can't say anything else at this point.
But I feel like it was kind of confirmation. Once he's strapped into that mind flayer thing, everyone around her is like, "You did good." You know, she's building up her reputation within the New Republic, even if it means sacrificing someone she was literally fighting on the same ship with uh, a few months prior, a year prior, or whatever. And I think she's willing to sacrifice the people around her to build up her reputation within this new republic to so she can accomplish whatever mission she needs to. I, I, I'm not denying that Disney does what you're saying, because they've done that many times.
So
And
why would it be any different this time? Is what I'm referring to.
well, that last scene where they're literally just sitting in the mind flayer room, and she literally turns up this torture device to play his mind, and uh, so she is the only one benefiting from the situation. This guy is not going to get out of the situation, and she literally turns up the device and then bites into the biscuit that she obviously gave him in the beginning. She dropped at his door, and she is the only one benefiting from the situation. She's leading him to this trap that is building up her reputation within this order. She doesn't care who she harms in the way, as long as, so far what I view right now is, she thinks she's helping the Empire or the future New Order, First Order. And I think, what words am I trying to use? I agree that Disney does that, but I don't think that was this situation. I really think they were. I think they had this plan from the start that she was gonna lead him on to this trap, and I think she's gonna be a character that they bring back often in the future seasons of not only this show but probably other shows as well, where she's gonna be seemingly so like this character who's she portrays herself as a perfect woman helping build a new order, but she's also sowing the seeds for the downfall of the new order and doing whatever she can to bring its downfall. Because seemingly so, the new order can't fight the Republic head on. Like they have to find other tactics to do it, and I view this as another tactic that these people view like they can go down to bring the downfall of the new Republic. Um, I just I don't view that line in the train. Like if you listen to liars and manipulators, they will say whatever they have to manipulate or lie to this person to
Except
accomplish.
in one occasion, uh,
You're viewing it from
in
the writing perspective. I'm viewing it just from
in terms
liars.
of adrenaline and and urgency. People in those circumstances usually slip, and or even they would just stay silent. But the fact that she's saying that is where it gets where it gets just so very strange. This is a very common thing that Disney has done, and that's why I look at this in terms of they've done the exact same thing again. And I can't give them the benefit of the doubt at this point. They've done it for so many years, and every time it's the same pattern. Why would I think that it'd be anything different?
I get that, but I just don't view that one line as, oh my gosh, this character.
No, it's not just that one line. There's other moments in this episode. That's just the most egregious one of where it's like the most obvious that there's something odd with how the character's written. Jess mentions, I think the doctor needs. Jess says, I think the doctor needed his mind wiped because of what he knows. Was that bit with the rumor of Moff Gideon escaped, but she's still she's still working for him. There is indeed some good points there, because for these characters, let's see. Jared Thorne says they know where they want the character to go. They just can't write it properly. Everything is a series of events that happen to lead to the next step. Disney writes by formula. When they have a gag like Tong's Day, they have to have a comeback, and according to the formula, the character that is next to him is going to say something like that. That's how they write. That's how the formula tells them to write.
But the formula is not that. If they followed the formula that Disney's been doing, she would be this person who's ex-Empire, who is just this perfect New Republic person.
No. I'm talking about how they write a scene.
I'm talking about the way they write men and women. Like,
right. But besides that,
there's
guiding
him along this mission. Yeah, but she would just be guiding him along this mission. She would just be this perfect person. And I feel like they were leaning into that trope where, like, oh, a woman's guiding this man through his mission. But it's not. She's not guiding him to accomplish his mission. She's guiding him to a trap, and they're kind of taking advantage, like that trope that's been made in recent Hollywood where, oh, yeah, man can't accomplish anything. They're just going to have a woman guide them through the whole thing. It's, oh, this woman is seemingly doing that, but then it's actually a trap. I think it's very different than the formula Hollywood has been doing in many recent years, and that's why I take a very different perspective on it, because I think they're kind of making fun of, or kind of making fun of that whole trope that Hollywood has been doing for many years, and that's why I'm not so anti her character, even with those few lines where, you might view could have been written better. I think they were just trying to do this whole thing where you don't quite know what she's doing until the end, where they reveal, yep, it's me. I led you all here. And at the end, you find out she's just trying to get rid of him, play his mind, just so she's the only one continuing on to accomplish whatever mission she needs to do.
Yeah, so those are the two different approaches to this character in this episode. But we end off the scene with one last thing. We see this mind flare. This mind flare is when I knew that the crew over at the Mandalorian didn't think this one through. Because we come to this machine and we're given a very strange sort of speech about how this thing in small doses is actually good for you. And then we know that, oh, this thing is dangerous on high doses. So what happens to the engineer? Once they turn the thing on, he decides to peace out. He leaves the person who turned in this guy, and just because she says that, oh, I'm a friend, but yet the guy was just saying earlier, you set me up. If these people have any intelligence whatsoever, you do not leave a machine like this with one person in charge. You leave it with a minimum of 2 or 3 people. That's what would have been done. The fact that they leave the one person who turned him in with control of this thing is very weird. Very weird indeed. So she ends up deciding that, you know what? This has been good fun. I'm going to turn up the voltage. And so she turns it up and then eats a yellow biscuit, when she said earlier that she likes the red ones. And so we then come back to the real story, which is Mando coming back, and we're going to just browse through this quickly because this has gone on for a long time already, and there's one last thing I want to mention before we close out. Because once they arrive back, they're stopped, and they ask the question, hey, you're not allowed to be back here because, so what gives? Why have you returned? Says, well, I've brought back proof that I've bathed in the living waters, which, by the way, they repeat quite a bit, which says to me, again, that the writers don't really know what they're doing. You just have to say it once, maybe twice, not multiple times. Bo-Katan says, I witnessed it, and like, how can you prove it? I have proof in this vial. So they bring it in to show to the armorer. The armorer looks at it and says, all right, let us see this proof that you have, that you've bathed in the living waters. And Bo-Katan says, he fell in, I pulled him out. Okay. So you're saying he fell in. He didn't bathe necessarily. He fell in. Just kind of ironic. She goes over and then pours the water into this basin. Now, this is an interesting scene here. She pours the water in, and up comes this colorful little effect. If it was so easy to prove that you were there, why would you ever need to doubt? You just say, show me the water. Literally, that's all you had to do. You didn't need to have any other form of proof. So when he gets stopped earlier is kind of nullified. Just kind of an interesting little point here. And so she turns around and says, you are now both Mandalorian. And as long as you don't take off your helmet, you will remain a part of our order. So now Bo-Katan is now a part of this group of Mandalorians. And we come to the end of the episode. And then in the credits, we see an interesting little thing, just a side point. We see all the different scenes, and I think that the artwork in the credit scenes are actually better than what we get in the film, which is unfortunate. Yeah, I wish they would have done more with this art. I wish it would have been a much better guide. And by the way, there's a hut over here. That should be a red flag. The huts are not welcome in the New Republic.
If you look at the concept art from all the episodes, you look at them, you're like, oh my gosh, those look so awesome. And you're like, why didn't I get that in the show? Because I feel like this art was made, or the design of it was made before the final product of the whole show. I feel like it's one of the things they finished early. Because otherwise, you'd think they'd make the show, and then they're just like, yeah, go make some art of this. But since it's so different, you're like, you'd think,
oh, it's concept
that
art.
This art was made for.
Yeah,
all the concept art.
Yeah, that's why it's shocking. Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I want to say is, I think a very interesting thing that's going to come up from the upcoming episodes with Bo-Katan being with this Creed is, that big dude with the huge armor that encountered them right when she walked in the door. He's Paz Vizsla. And that was the Creed. He was, I can't remember the first name of him. His name's Isla, the person who was the leader of the Death Watch, which she joined while Mandalore was still a thing. And I think there's going to be some conflict or whatever between her and that big dude, because she literally knew probably her father or uncle or whatever relation that big dude is in relation to Isla. She was literally united with Clan Isla at one point during the Clone Wars, and I think there's going to be some interesting tension between them there in the upcoming episodes. There's just some. I really like this. She's kind of going on this journey of accepting these, but the way she got to that point, I don't agree with exactly. I think her going into the water should have been her choice instead of, oh, I saw this person drowning and I just decided to save them, and now I'm redeemed for everything. I think she should have chose to go in those waters at some point.
Absolutely.
Kind of what we said last episode, they should have both gone in together and then gone on their own journeys to get back to the top of the water. They go in, get sucked down, and then they go on their own journeys to get back to the top. But as far as that big dude and her, I I hope at least that there is going to be something there between those two characters because the Isla clan, which that dude his family was a part of, they have a connection with the clan Kreese, which is the clan Bo-Katan's a part of, and that could be interesting. And a very interesting thing was when Din got accepted back in. You know, he said, "This is the way," and then the armor was like, "Bo-Katan, you are accepted in. You haven't taken your helmet off." And speaking of that, is the helmet the only rule that these Mandalorians have? Do they have any other rules? They're just like, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but as long like that's literally all she asked him. She was like, or all she asked her. She was like, "Have you taken your helmet off?" It's like, is that the only thing you guys care about? Is the helmet? Like, are there any other rules or anything that go into being a part of this creed? Like, they could have added some layers to it
Mm-hmm.
besides just the helmet. Like, the helmet is literally everything to these people, which uh, there could be some more depth to it. But she was like, "Bo-Katan Kryze, you have been redeemed. You are now a part of the creed." And everyone said, "This is the way." And she just kind of sits there and doesn't stands there and doesn't say anything. She's kind of just in shock. Obviously, she's kind of in shock this whole episode, trying to piece things together and trying to figure things out. That's why I hope we get a heart to heart between her and Din. I think her and Din are going to sympathize with each other in the future episodes, while the Vizsla character is kind of combative towards her and her accepting being accepted into the creed and such. I really hope we don't get much more of Dr. Pershing and Alila Kane. I hope it's really focused on Mandalorian from here on out.
Yeah.
They're good for an episode and showing up every now and then, but I don't know. I'm really interested in how Bo-Katan is going to be introduced into this new creed and her perspective on the whole thing.
So Jess mentions that maybe they had her eating yellow instead of red biscuits at the very end because she was telling a lie earlier when she said red, a subtle thing that she has been completely lying the whole time. Yes, absolutely. Very, very true. See, now things like that,
thing she said.
Yeah, so things like that are actually good. That's good writing because that's showing something subtle. Is something that the audience can be able to figure out and see little bits here and there. It's a creative way of going about doing it. Let's see here. BR Jason mentions manipulated. She ended up. Jared Thorne mentions she ended up manipulating a victim that we'll see the light later. Manipulated by.
She's saying she'll be manipulated by
I'm trying to catch up to something I can actually pull the thread forward here. They only have to say it once unless they are bathing in living waters to replace the other famous book that talks about that. Maybe that's too much of a stretch, but I just can't tell anymore. If it is concept art, does that mean that the hut is not part of the story? So most likely something like that is just generic in the background. So it would have been saying, hey, look, here's a character of the New Republic. But the Hutts were not a part of the New Republic. They were very much against it, and they became a threat later on. So that's why it's like the person who drew it didn't really know about the Hutt lore. But that's an important thing that I wish things like that should not have made it past into the concept art, let alone the episode. So fortunately, it didn't make it into the actual footage, but it did make it into the concept art, which is kind of strange. Something I want to mention about this story, just as a whole, though. This episode very well could have been written by two different groups that had no idea that these episodes were going to be put together in the same episode. This episode was 50 minutes. I don't think that they actually intended for these two to be put together, because we end the Mandalorian's arc early on, and then we enter into the Coruscant arc. There's no transition. It's a very abrupt change of scene. There's no lead up, no words that were said that would have given us any sort of like logic as to why we're going to this other place. Very abrupt. And the thing here about this episode is that it feels like it was 2 episodes put back to back. You could have actually had it end literally like around this scene when he's asking, can I continue my work? And then he decides that he's going to do it. And then you have a new episode where it's them actually going out and getting the, trying to get the gear. That's what I think was supposed to happen, was that it would have been...
When he got captured, I felt like the end of the episode, it went to black after he got the handcuffs on him. I was like, oh, this is the end of the episode. Mm-hmm. And then we see the amphibious creature or whatever. I can't remember the name of the species. That kept talking him into the... Yeah. No.
Amphibious creature. Oh, yeah. The Corellian.
Mind Flayer. Yeah. I thought that was going to be like kind of the opening scene for whatever next episode or whatever. But right when he gets captured, it was like with the handcuffs. And then it felt like the end of the episode. If you kind of rewatch it, like it felt like a kind of decent ending to whatever they're trying to do there to continue on to the next episode. And then they're like, we have to continue it on for a bit type of thing. Mm-hmm.
But based upon solely the time, based solely upon the length of time of the episode, it feels like it was 2 or 3 episodes that were put back to back, which is partially why it felt so very disconnected, is that it was not designed to be part of the same episode. And I would be very curious to know behind the scenes what happened, because something went wrong with their storytelling, because their storytellers are all over the place. Which is, again, a grievance I have against this series as a whole, against Disney as a whole. But this episode epitomizes their lack of direction. But that being said, I think that this episode could have been really good. And here's the reason why. It would have taken maybe... Well, you could have taken half the episode, refilmed it, and had a really, really compelling story, showing people of the Empire realizing this new republic is not much better than the Empire, and that they start to then desire a return of the Empire. That could have sparked off the First Order. It could have sparked off a whole change and introduced new characters that would have appeared later on in the sequel trilogy or things like that. This was a golden opportunity that they threw away, almost as if they didn't have an idea for what they wanted to do with the Mandalorian. So they said, hey, let's just throw this in here. We'll see later on in the future episodes if these characters make more occurrences. But this is how I would have actually told the story from start to finish. I would have had it start off where they're in the cave, they're in the mines, and they are dealing with having just come out of the waters. They both went in of their own accord, but Bo-Katan had some sort of vision of the mythosaur, and she believes that she saw its shadow. And so they leave. But as they're heading on out, they see that there are TIE fighters in the area, and they are attacking, which gives them reason to believe that there is something else going on other than just a casual warlord that is in the area. They have a aerial fight out there, and when they see that there's more ships on the horizon, they decide that they're going to jump. But then something else happens. We start to get hints that there's something else that is transpiring. Either one of two things. Either we transition to see a character we've seen in past episode traveling to Coruscant, or we go and we see inside one of the cockpits of one of these TIE interceptors. A guy takes off his helmet and he's talking on comms to someone back in Coruscant and saying, hey, we just successfully destroyed the Mandalorian fortress. We won't have any more problems of them here in the system for a while. And then we cut back and we just see this figure, a shadowy figure who who just received the call and saying, carry on. And they walk off. And then we see this character approach, and we don't really know who they are. We're kept at a distance, so thus we can't actually find out who it is. They enter into this building and they see Dr. Pershing giving his lecture. And he's trying to make a plea. He's trying to make a plea to the New Republic that they need to pursue his work because he actually thinks they could help them. But when he leaves, by the way, the ear thing, I can't help but wonder if this has to do with a mind flayer. That's actually something that they never actually finished that arc, which makes me wonder if he's stuck in a time loop. That's just a side thing.
Speaking of his ear, the reason his ear is like that, and he keeps touching it, is he's held captive by a fellow Imperial person, and Mando and Cara Dune show up, and Cara Dune shoots the person that has a gun to his head. And while shooting that person, Cara Dune shoots that person who has a gun to his head, and while it shoots the person in the head behind him, it grazes his ear. So it's kind of a constant reminder of Cara Dune and what this person who's a part of supposedly the New Order or New Republic has done to him.
Interesting. So that I did not remember that part, but that's actually good to know. So he's giving his speech, and as he leaves, he starts to realize that the people out there didn't actually care for the New Republic, nor did they care for the Empire. They care for Coruscant. And they're more interested in whether or not stuff like this will actually benefit them. When they realize that it doesn't, then they kind of laugh it off and say, oh, isn't that kind of a clever thing that you have thought about? You have a lot of wit. Imagine what you could do to really help out Coruscant in the future. Kind of helping us to show that this is a bureaucracy that only cares about itself. As he leaves and goes back to the compound, he then meets with others of the Empire, and they start to reminisce about the old days. But not only that, they actually start to say good things, like from the Imperial perspective, what is it that led them to want to be a part of the Empire? And they start to mention the deception that they were living under. And kind of saying, I know that things are all different now and we're moving on, but golly, I miss the old days because I actually felt like we were making a difference. And I know that we're making a difference now for the New Republic. Yes, long live the New Republic. But boy, it just feels like things are not quite as great as we were told they were going to be. And just starts to tease the audience that something's not right. We also get to see there is someone else that is there, Elia Kane. And Dr. Pershing is a bit curious as to why she would be there. And Kane starts to deceive him and saying, hey, you know what, I actually am standing with you. But I would not actually have her character carry on too much with the deception. I actually would have it be a little bit more costing. Maybe something that's trying to taunt him. It was something more taunting him into doubting the New Republic, kind of feeding him lies, not trying to take advantage of him, but trying to get him to turn his back on the New Republic. He goes to work and he realizes that they're destroying everything. And it hits a chord with him. He just becomes distraught over this because he's remembering all of the people he worked with. He remembered the people he was talking with and having drinks with the night beforehand. And he sees the New Republic disgracing them, humiliating them in that sense. And he starts to become really discouraged. And so he starts becoming more inclined to actually follow through with what Eliakim is trying to get him to do, which is to break the rules and become engaged once again in his work. And little does he know, Eliakim is trying to do this in terms of trying to help get him back into the graces of what is becoming the First Order. She's a spy. She's trying to find sympathizers here on Coruscant in order to get them to leave and go to an Outer Rim base where everybody is trying to build anew this First Order. But she's doing it secretively because she does know that Pershing was very poorly treated, and so thus is slowly trying to get him to come to terms with what happened and saying, no, you were actually doing good, and we were actually doing good, and taking every opportunity to convey that information. And when he starts to see the coldness of the New Republic, he starts to remember the Empire fondly. Kind of like several other folks throughout history that start to look back on tyranny with fondness. It's because they were betrayed, and by what came along and offered to kind of be the opposite. And when it chose to be just the same, they start to remember things in the past with more fondness because it is more familiar to them. They spent more time there. They have friends that were a part of it. So he agrees to go forth and restart his research. But while he's at work, he's starting to collect cards. He's starting to find out which cards are good for like being preserved, and he's storing them away into his bag because he's trying to start to salvage, and his mind has changed. We're only halfway through the episode, and he's already starting to become like Eliakim in that sense. And throughout the episode, he becomes more and more bitter against the New Republic, and he starts seeing it for what in reality really is, just another bureaucracy that is mismanaging the skills and talents of the people around them. So then they decided they're going to go to an Imperial yard and get the gear that they need to really get his work up and running. And he's kind of curious why Eliakim's helping him. Turns out Eliakim knows the the Star Destroyer that had like all the prime equipment that he would need, things that she's going to give him and then help get him off world. And as he leaves, Eliakim then goes off to try and find someone else to start manipulating. In this episode, all things considered, we could have avoided this, which is kind of like a sort of manipulation and execution, so to speak, and could have focused on trying to add another level to the Empire and thus giving us reason to believe why they would actually rise again. It gives us this idea of that they live in this sort of utopia, that everything here is perfect, but as through the Empire's eyes, they start to see it as a dystopia. When we come to the end of the episode, we thus have a connection that what happened at the start of the episode actually has a connection with what's happening back on Coruscant, because we had the fighter that would have been communicating with what turns out to be Eliakim, which is being an in-between. Then we go back out to continue the story with the Mandalorians, and we get the same sort of ending that we had here. That's how I would have approached it. I would have focused more on showing the Empire in terms of how they were perceiving the New Republic and showing a change in the people there. Focusing on trying to salvage an empire that is falling apart rather than betraying it and trying to take advantage of the different people there, trying to manipulate folks to actually return rather than just off them. Because if they just wanted to off them, then they could have done that a different way. If Eliakim wanted to get research, well, she didn't leave with any research. She was just positioning herself. And if she's positioning herself, why did she have to off this guy. Like, sure, maybe to get a better standing, but there was other ways to do it as well. This guy was a bit valuable and probably would have been more important to the First Order. So that's how I would have approached it. But
You think sorry.
oh yeah, but anyway, that's just another approach, and there are several other ones. But just for right now, that's the approach I would have taken with this episode.
Do you think this episode could be a build-up for someone like Dr. Pershing being anti the New Republic? You know,
Not after the Mind Flayer, but it could have been.
well, I feel like that's like the peak of it. They're like the New Republic literally tried to shock my brain pretty much. Why would I ever side with the New Republic after such a thing? Like, if we see him in future episodes and his mind is still functionable after being put through such a thing, I feel like he's going to be like, no, screw these people. I worked with the Empire and they allowed me to do my science. Even though it was for the benefit of them, I was still allowed to do my science. Or these people, they literally hooked me up to a machine and tried to fry my brain pretty much. And I think this is the buildup, kind of to what you're saying, where people are just in the Empire kind of reminiscing on the good and the bad of the Empire. And I think he's going to start to focus on the good of the Empire and what he was able to do there, and that he's not able to do at the New Republic. And I think he's going to slowly stray away from the New Republic, especially but in a very different way than Elia, because I think she's taking a much more methodical approach to the whole thing. Acting like she's a part of it, and even betraying some of the people who were a part of the Empire just to help herself. I think he's just going to go full out and just completely leave. I think he's going to leave if he's still functionable.
Is he even still alive at this point? The Mind Flayer, from what I understand based upon lore, is basically scrambling your brain permanently, and so you're basically a vegetable. If that's the case, that means that he's pretty much dead at this point.
I think they're going to do it very differently in Disney. Disney Star Wars. I think it's just going to drive him crazy. Like, anything that he was cautious about that we saw in the first episode, in this episode, I think it's just going to, instead of being cautious and trying to like hide those feelings, I think it's just going to almost be like a madness type thing, or he's just not even going to care type of thing. I think he's going to try and reconnect with the Empire at some point, or the remnants of it. And
I guess that would be interesting if Disney's changing what this thing does, then that actually would make sense. He's
definitely not dead.
I'm just curious. I would be I said effectively dead, because if it's similar to what they've introduced in the past, then pretty much it is going to render him useless. If it isn't, I would be surprised, but if Disney's rewriting it, then I guess it would make sense. Jared Thorne says she erases his mind because he knew too much, but with him too much alive, with him alive and brain dead, it can be spread around that the Republic was cruel and didn't really try to help former Imperials. Yes, that very well could be the approach. But again, that would have kind of needed more lead up. Like, I know there's the importance of having things that are kind of surprises, but there's other things that just lead to confusion. And unfortunately, I think this is one of those episodes that, for me, leaves me more confused than anything else. And I find that very unfortunate, because it did have a direction that I think could have been really good. And I just mentioned it earlier, how I think I would have approached this. Will they do that? Well, will they redeem this episode moving forward? I don't know. It feels so very out of place. And because it does feel out of place, I can't help but think that they didn't actually think through this effectively. I wouldn't say it was well done, but they do have options, says Jared. Yes, they do.
Yeah,
Yes, they
I
do.
agree.
But yeah, it is not set up in such a way that would give me much hope that this is going to be the case. It's kind of like some of the past episodes that we've seen, in particular with past Mandalorian past Mandalorian seasons, or even Book of Boba Fett. There were episodes that made absolutely no difference to the story. Oh, sure, Disney thought it made a difference, but when it was removed, you could actually kind of get away with it not even being there. That happens with whole scenes throughout these episodes. I'd be very curious to see what Disney's planning to do with this. They have a lot of episodes left. I believe it said
This is
8
gonna be
episodes in total, and
this
we're
is gonna be
nowhere
a
near that.
very crucial season. This is gonna be a very This is a very crucial season for Mandalorian, and Mandalorian is a very crucial part of Disney Star Wars at the moment. They could either crash and burn with what they do in this season, or it could lay uh, you know, plant some seeds for many things to grow in the future. Or it could just somehow be something in between where we're kind of in the same position we are now. But I think this is going to be a big season. This season individually is going to be a big season for Disney Star Wars. And there's a lot that could happen. There's a lot of. I think they could expand on everything they built upon. Just in this episode, there's tons of interesting stuff they could expand upon. Will they, though? Who knows? I'm not some person who's anti Disney Star Wars to the fullest, but I don't. I'm definitely very critical of it. But if they can execute this season and the things they're building, I would definitely. I'll give them credit for it. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling on.
So in this last part here, we're going to quickly, now that we've kind of gone through the process, we're going to go through the main parts of it and kind of rate it. So based upon the first section, starting from the cave in Mandalore, all the way up until them jettisoning off into space, how would you rate, on a scale of 0 to 1, how would you rate this first scene in terms of the character's performance?
Character's performance. Um. I guess I'd give it a 1. You know, I really liked. Bo-Katan has been my huge problem with many of the episodes, not in this season, but in the past. And I really liked that we actually saw some emotion out of her character in this episode, which I personally think we should have saw tenfold in the last episode. But I was happy to finally see it in this episode. Um,
What about
I'd give it a
dialogue?
1.
Because I give it a 0.5, because I think that her character should have. I think that their character should have started in a different place. And
What'd you rate the last one?
for a character, 0.5.
Okay. Dialogue.
Dialogue. In terms of how their dialogue was, I'm going to actually give that a 1, because I actually like the reaction that was given it at the start. Now I think it kind of tapers off, but I'll raise it to a 1 for this one.
Yeah, I'll probably do a 1 as well. I was finally happy to see some stuff that we didn't see last episode.
Action.
I actually really liked I know you had some of your critiques of it, and I know Jared personally had his critiques of the TIE fighters being a little fidgety. But I actually really liked the scene. I would personally do like a 0.7, but I'll probably
We're
round
going.
it up to a 1.
Yeah, we're going
But
1. Yeah, because we're not doing a scale of 10. The fact that we even have a 0.5 is a little bit of a difference from what I was originally intending. But
Yeah.
yeah, 0
But
to 1.5
my
is
only
like the
complaint,
in between.
my really only complaint with the opening bit is that neither Bo-Katan or Din, they didn't get hit by a single shot. You know, their shields got hit a little bit, but you would think that in those shots of Bo-Katan sewing, uh, like weaving through the land, you know, there would be a few shots landed. Like
Well,
if you
she
compare it
also
to
crashed
Top
into
Gun,
rocks at one point,
yeah, and
so
that
there's
did
there's
nothing.
more than a scratch.
But
I give it a
if you compare it to
0.5.
like Top Gun Maverick, they're literally flying through that bit, and they're taking in the final act, they're taking shots. You
Mm-hmm.
know, their plane is taking damage, and the damage is affecting the way they can continue on. Whereas with the final, here, you know, they get out of the whole thing, and they're like, yeah, we're good. We didn't take any damage. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I
So
really liked some of
zero
the
zero
flying
to
scenes.
one, 0 to 1.
0.5. 0.5,
Point
sorry, I
five. Okay.
continued on from there.
Yeah. Setting.
Uh,
I give it a 0.5 because I like the mines and Mandalore, but I'm not a fan of the other planet.
yeah, I'd probably put a 0. I think it could be much better.
All right. So right now, okay, I'll put that in. For the next scene, starting from the speech that is given all the way up to the drinks that are given at, well, actually, technically up to the biscuits, but we're going up to this point.
Which speed? Oh, sorry.
So from Coruscant up until when they're having drinks / when the biscuits are handed over.
Oh, purpose just speed.
For character, how would you rate their character?
0.5.
0.5. I'm going to give it 0.5 because I actually like Dr. Pershing's beginning. I like the Imperial troopers and officers telling their stories, but I do not like Coruscant, and that's going to impact my setting here in just a moment. Dialogue. I'm giving it, actually, surprisingly, a 1. I think the dialogue was good for the start.
Gosh, I'm very in between because there are some moments where I feel like it was a 1, some moments I feel like it was 0. Um, like right when Pershing gets out of the theater, everyone's just like, "You're so brave." You know, they're just kind of like just these blind compliments, and they're just like, "Oh, what if I was drafted? I'm happy I wasn't drafted." It was just kind of corny. I'll probably do for dialogue. I'll actually do a 0. I wasn't super impressed with the dialogue in the first bit.
Action is a 0 because there wasn't any action. Setting. I give it a 0. I do not like the setting that they put in for this.
Yeah, I'll do 0 as well.
Yeah, kind of like what Jared mentioned. Coruscant feels lifeless compared to the prequels.
Yeah.
Yes, it does feel very lifeless.
Or the Clone Wars, you see them going to some of the bars and stuff, and just interacting with random average people within the planet. Not to the fullest extent, but you still see it. And you compare that to this, it's just like, ugh. It's kind of depressing the way they did it in this episode.
From the record room up until the decision to betray the New Republican to restart his work. So that incorporates this scene in the middle of the robots and the park. It includes their discussion, and sure, we could split this up into like 2 or 3, but I'm trying to speed this thing up.
Yeah.
Because it's all technically the same arc. Him being filled with doubt.
Okay, wait. So
So
record room? What's
from
the
the
record
from
room?
the from the start of the record room all the way up
What's that?
to where he is right now, where he is decommissioning, where he's going through the records, the
Oh,
data, and
okay.
deleting stuff and deciding which ones are going to be removed.
Until where?
Up until when he decides that he is going to betray the New Republic and actually restart his work. Well, technically help the New Republic in his terms, but he's going to break the rules.
Mm, okay.
Character development.
I'll do 0.5. Could have been better, could
0.5.
have been worse.
I'm giving it a 0. Really did not like this part of their character development. Dialogue.
Um, 0.
0. I'm going to give it a 0 too. Actually, yes, a 0 because they failed to do what I kind of said earlier, and thus kind of sabotaged where this story could have gone. If they had taken the other route, I would have given it a 0.5 or a 1, but yeah, I'll give it a 0. With trillions of people, the scenes should look like Bourbon Street on a Friday night as far as crowd size. Yes, but the crowds take a lot of money. Even with all modern technology, crowds are still a challenge. Action for this. Well, there really isn't any action, so I get a 0. Well, actually, technically, technically it's a 0.5 because it's neutral. I should actually update that for the other one.
It's tough to, if they don't do action, we shouldn't penalize it. Because, hopefully if they don't do action, they substitute it with good dialogue.
Yep. So we're going to update that. There we go. Setting. I give it a 0 because of that park. That park was atrocious to me.
Terrible. But I actually really liked seeing Coruscant from his perspective. And some of the CGI, I don't know why, but it really, really reminded me of kind of like the flying scenes when Anakin and Obi-Wan were flying through to catch that bounty hunter. Like there was just some stuff where I was like, this just feels like the prequels as far as the CGI goes. I'll do a 0.5 for it. I'll do a 0.5.
0.5. All right, so now going to record that. Next, we have the action. Well, basically the action sequence from when it's when they are trying to go to the Star Destroyer, and up until when he is captured. Well, up to when we end with him getting his mind flight.
Okay.
So that's a long sequence. So all the way up from like when they're in the train and whatnot to when he's getting his mind flayed.
Okay.
Character.
0.5.
Okay, I'm going to give that a 0. Dialogue.
.5.
0.5. I'm also going to give that a 0. Action.
There wasn't much action.
There was more action than most of the video. Well, except for the Mandalorian.
There wasn't much action in this episode, to be honest.
Yeah, that is
compared
true.
to the last episode where we find trolls and stuff. So it's really hard to do the action for this episode and really penalize them for it.
I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it.
I'll do a 0.
I'm going to give it a 0 because the train sequence was so very unbelievable, and when they get arrested, when they're running through the ship, there really isn't any need for them to run. If he's going to get turned over, there's no need to run out of the building if they're right behind you. So, setting.
No, it is 0 as well.
Okay, I'm going to also give it a 0. I did not like Well, actually,
Wait,
I'm going to give it a 0.5 for the setting because actually I like the idea of the decommissioned yards. I just
so we're
didn't like
doing from the train all the way to the
to the mind flayer.
when he gets okay. Yeah, I'll do point 0.5 as well. I really liked when he's on the train, he looks back and sees Coruscant. There's some very interesting bits there. And I
All right.
really like that character, that fat alien looking dude. Kind of looks like George R. R. Martin if he was a Star Wars Star Wars alien. That one that keeps looking on them on the train. Yeah, just everything around them. Yeah, I'll do 0.5. Let's continue.
All right. So then the Mandalorian enclave character.
Character, I will actually do a 1 for this.
All right, I'm going to give it a 0.5 because I think that some of the characters could have been better conveyed. Now, I did like it. So I will say it would be closer to maybe yeah, it would be closer to a 1 than not. Well, you know what? Because I've given it a 0 and other times, I'll give this a 1. I'll give this one a dialogue. This one I'll give a 0.5 because I think that
Yeah,
it
I'll do
was
0.5.
repetitive.
I'll do 0.5 as well.
Action's getting
Now,
a
well,
0.5
this wasn't
because
much.
nothing happened.
Yeah,
Setting. I gotta be honest, I don't like this planet.
yeah.
So
I'll do
I'm
0.
actually giving it a 0. It
And
feels like
it
this planet
doesn't
could be so much better.
it doesn't even feel like they're living there. Like where are they sleeping? Where are they farming food? Where are they doing anything on this planet? We're just seeing where they're making armor. We don't see anything other. Uh, we don't see any of the fact that they're living in this cave type thing. You would think they would be making some makeshift beds. They'd have some sort of farming system, something that you could just show. You don't have to dive into it, but you just show it in some like part between a few scenes while you're on that planet. It just feels like we just see the armorer's area, and you're like, where are these people sleeping? Are they literally just sleeping on the dirt and the sand? Like, what is going on this planet? Which kind of makes sense because the Mandalorians, they're not well off. You know, they're hunted. Their planet's been destroyed, but you would think they would still have the people on this planet individually would have some sort. They'd build some sort of living system within this planet where you just do not see it all. So I would do. Uh, we're doing setting. I'd actually do 0. I'd actually do 0.
Right. So that brings this episode to just barely a 4 out of 10. So that's a good point. What did they do with the croc corpse that was out there? There's no sign of the battle. There's no bones. That thing was gigantic.
I think it feed you for a year. They should definitely be taking advantage of that and be eating that thing for a year.
Oh, what's more? There's no scarring on the land. There's no blood.
Oh yeah.
There's no explosions. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
They raked to the sand. They were like, let's get the sand looking pristine again. And they sent some young Mandalorians out there to rake the sand.
I mean, it does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What did it's Gilligan's Island planet. It does kind of feel like that, doesn't it? All that stuff is on the other side of the planet. So this is an interesting episode.
I have a question.
I think it's a very polarizing episode in a couple of ways. I think that it's going to continue to be polarizing the more that we delve into who these characters are that we've been introduced to. How involved are they going to be in this episode? In the series as a whole. Are we going to get more of these characters and less of Mando? And if so, why do they not get their own episode their own series at that point? I don't know.
I'm very curious. We did our review as a duo, but what would you rate it as an individual? 1 to 10.
Personally,
Yeah, and I'll do it as well.
I actually had the numbers and and I erased it for the. I don't record that, but I honestly should record that.
I did my
I
rating of it.
believe mine came to a point. So I think mine technically came to a 2 out of 10.
Oh, mine was a 5 out of 10. Could have been
Yes.
much worse, but could have been much better as well. Which has kind of been my constant throughout all the episodes. I'm like, they could be better, but they could be absolute dog crap. Like, so I take the good and the bad from each.
So I look at this in terms of that a lot of these episodes, they should know by now how to make good episodes. And this one wasn't there. I did not sign on to watch these characters. Now, if they had their own story, then they could have had more time to build up their characters. And honestly, I might have found that interesting. But when they interrupt Mandalorian for these characters, when technically we signed on to watch something about the Mandalorians, I'm just left perplexed as to why they're doing it, other than to prepare for a brand new show similar to when they brought in Boba Fett. Similar as to how they introduced Ahsoka, and now the rumors are that Ahsoka's going to get her own show. Cara Dune apparently was like debated whether or not she would get her own show. It's like these characters are token characters that are stand-ins for or advertisements for what's to come. And I don't like that approach. If you're going to bring in a character, it better match the story that you're in. It needs to at least play into the world that they are being introduced into. Have these characters somehow tied in. Have Elia Kane, one of the TIE fighter, one of the TIE Interceptor pilots. That would have been interesting. Have the Doctor actually being consulted by Mando. I mean, it might sound ludicrous, but technically have it that maybe that he knows how to be able to like deal with injuries, and so he's thus going to find out how to deal with something that's appearing on Grogu. Maybe that's why he's consulting him. Then it can spark these characters' involvement more. But when you just throw us into it, it feels so egregious that they would not give us any sort of build-up. That's why I don't like this.
I'm not so anti Dr. Purvish having a story within this episode. The thing that's so weird, or the show, the thing that's so weird about it is every other time it happened, it was whenever they crossed paths with Din or Grogu. Like we saw him in the first season. We saw him in the second season when he was doing experiments upon Grogu to try and study this. He's just trying to study him and learn from him. So I don't have problems with seeing them, but when you take away a whole episode, it's just not the most entertaining thing to see from a viewer perspective, and could definitely be. I think they could do it in a much better way where we learn all this stuff, and whenever we see them cross paths, instead of literally cutting off the Mandalorian story to just jump cut to a different planet and learn, just so we can understand what this character is going through.
Absolutely. Well, we've come to the end of this review, this discussion, and dive into the lore behind Mandalorian Episode 3. I gotta say, if this is what we have to expect moving forward, I think that Mandalorian is going to lose a lot of people. That's my personal thought. Disney has the ability to really make these characters tie in the future of Star Wars, like the one that they've already introduced. These characters actually can make that happen, but they need to be handled differently. It does have potential. But man, I just don't see the potential with what they've given us. If they were to clear up some of these mysteries, I think it would feel more meaningful. Kind of like how when we were first introduced to Sidious in the prequels, George Lucas kept him off to the shadows, but he knew the audience is going to figure it out. He kind of teased that it was going to happen. The story still carried weight. It was still impactful. People loved it, even though there were not really too many surprises. I don't like this idea of writing surprises as the way for creating a story. I've never liked it because I think that it creates weak writers. And Disney, unfortunately, has done this so often that I look at this as weak writing. Now, other folks do see it as successful. And there's going to be those different camps. And especially the folks I know that kind of got me inspired to do this to begin with. There's some people I know, they love this series. Everything about it. I don't get it. But that being said, it doesn't lessen that this show has an impact on them. They are very much inspired by it. So in that sense, Disney has an audience. I just think that they could take this stuff to the next level and bring in a bigger audience. Try and play to different groups and help use the Mandalorian to unify a fan base. But right now, Disney's not interested in that. Instead, they're spending more time trying to give us little snapshots of Galaxy's Edge, you could say. That's what this episode really is it is a marketing thing for Galaxy's Edge. I've not been to Galaxy's Edge. I wish I could go to it, but I don't think Galaxy's Edge advertisement is bad. Just please make the process of showing it feel more meaningful. If you were to do that, they would win over my support, no problem. I love lore, and I want to see Easter eggs like that thrown in there that you can be able to say, "Oh yeah, I recognize that popsicle from the show." But don't put it into an episode that feels dead. Make it feel meaningful. Make it feel alive. Make every character either beloved or hated, and have it to where their interactions feel genuine. The prequels are artistic, but as some people have claimed, and actually rightfully so, at times the acting makes it feel fake. And it is indeed a grievance of George Lucas's directing, but he's also really good at building in lore. That's where he succeeds. I think most other companies, most other writers cannot figure out how to effectively weave in lore without shooting themselves in the foot, almost literally.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these elements, while good in isolation, like this one for the Star Tours reference, I think that it fails to actually win over the fans that they need to win over. And in the end, I kind of feel like we're not being given the Mandalorian. I kind of feel like, well, in a way, this show is trying to flay our mind for something else entirely. I don't even understand why they're doing this stuff. The fact that we don't know why this episode exists is going to turn off people. And Disney should know that they will lose people because of this episode. Because you have to introduce why this stuff is there. Otherwise, you feel like you're being taken for a ride. And that's not effective. Anyway, that's my rant.
But Dr. Pershing, he's been a character in every season of Mandalorian. So I feel like they were just trying to expand upon a character who's been involved throughout it all. And I think this is the first time that we actually see them try and expand on it and give a story to everything. So I don't think
Here's
it's
how you
just a
could have.
random thing.
Here's how you could have actually changed that a little bit differently. Have it that Dr. Pershing. Here's another way to write this. Have it that Dr. Pershing is giving his speech, and then someone appears, and they try and assassinate him. He gets scared, and the New Republic offers him some level of protection. He says, "Actually, I don't trust it. I don't trust the New Republic." He's still skittish about it. He doesn't know if they have his best interest in mind. And so then he decides that he's going to actually call upon the help of someone he knows who can be bought. He's going to call on a Mandalorian. And so that brings Din into this picture. That would have given them a chance to bring his character into here and have it feel meaningful. But we need to weave in this character so it feels like it belongs. Not like we're trying to attach this story onto another one. Have him call on the Mandalorian because he knows that he will do it. So,
Yep.
well,
Understandable.
we can wish for things to be different, but in the end, Disney will keep pressing on with this story, and I doubt that they'll come and consult us, as I doubt they'll go and consult anybody else that has been reviewing this episode. But if I was to do one thing, only one thing to change it, I would have had that plot line. I would have had it start by bringing in the Mandalorian. Then it could have been a handoff, and then you could have had this story carry on as it was made, without it feeling so out of place. If you're to do that, I think that we would have had a massive improvement. But anyway, we've been going on for a good long while. It is time to bring this to a close. Any last closing thoughts that you have on this controversial episode?
I don't hate it as much as other people hate it, but I'm not someone who's like, oh, this is perfect. I'm definitely in the middle of this episode. I think it could plant the seeds for some interesting storylines in the future. It depends how they, the writers attack what they've done right now in the future. So I guess it could be worse because there's been some moments like in Loki or WandaVision where I'm like, why did they write this? And it just completely loses my interest. But with this, I still have interest in what they could do with this story that they're creating. So I'm very in the middle with what they're doing right now. That's the last note I want to leave, and I hope they do good.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for participating and coming over to watch. Much appreciated. Moving forward, I am actually going to be taking some of these ideas and just kind of putting them down to much smaller bite sizes, because I know that 3 hours and 15 minutes is a long time for a discussion, and so thanks to those who have stayed with it, and we will make some shorter ones for people to be able to really sink their teeth into and maybe see what alternatives could have been out there. In the end, if you enjoy this show, while I might not completely understand it, I can definitely see the reasons why people enjoy it. And I look forward to seeing where the story goes. Even though I don't have a whole lot of hope for it, I still think they have potential. And I've gotten to see some aspects of the Star Wars universe that no other show has done. Getting to see that there is this growing discontentment among some of the people of Coruscant. We've not gotten to see that, and I think that's a really good lore aspect. So I hope that they focus more on that and less on some other writing strategies that they have. I want to see more of that. So if Disney does that, I will be intrigued. All right, well, we're going to bring this to a close. Thank you, Rolling Chairs, for joining again. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me on. It's always a good time.
All right. Well, we will see you all next time. As for our Twitch audience, we will not be rating because of how these discussions are set up. And so we will just close out after the stream comes to an end. So have a great day, everyone.
It's off on my screen.